Naruto, advancing through pure effort in Konoha. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451 First Kill. Walking into the valley, Uchiha Qingming did not hesitate at all and immediately divided the team into 3 parts. Then, he ordered 2 of the mist ninjas to lead a team each and advanced through the jungles on both sides of the valley. He himself led the main force and walked through the middle valley. In this way, even if there was an ambush by Konoha in the valley, the teams on both sides could gain enough buffer time and space for the main force. From this, it can be seen that Uchiha Qingming is not a reckless person. And his arrangement did work. Just when they were in the middle of the valley, SYNOPSIS gave the order to attack. Immediately, the Konoha ninjas ambushed on both sides took off their disguises, rushed out of their hiding places, and led by a group of senior ninjas, killed the mist ninjas in the valley. However, because of the obstruction of the mist ninjas on both sides, they failed to rush directly to the mist ninja army, resulting in the suddenness of the attack not being played out. It is for this reason that Uchiha Qingming can give orders calmly. However, the first order he issued was not to let the mist ninja in the valley support the friendly forces on both wings, but to let people inform the team coming from the sea about the situation here, and let them advance at full speed and attack the Blackstone stronghold at the fastest speed. After the message was conveyed, he asked the people behind him to split into 2 parts to support the friendly forces in the jungle on both sides of the valley. With their support, the mist ninja, who was originally retreating, immediately stopped their retreat and maintained the battle line halfway up the mountain. For a while, the field was in chaos, and all kinds of sounds were heard. There were the ding-ding sounds of kunai colliding with kunai, the rumbling sounds of detonating tags being continuously detonated, and the wailing sounds of injured ninjas. In short, the whole valley was very lively. This was the scene that Qingming saw when he arrived here. With a thought, Qingming lifted the shadow clone technique. In front of him, the shadow clone that was flying towards him disappeared instantly. Then, a lot of memories flooded into his mind. Qingming instantly understood the cause and effect of the matter, and also knew the task assigned to him by SYNOPSIS. Being a thug, Qingming murmured, his face did not change much. There was no other reason. When the other party pulled him to participate in this ambush mission, he had already guessed the other party's idea, which was nothing more than his combat power. Now, it is normal for the other party to ask him to deal with the enemy's high-end combat power as much as possible. Qingming has already acquiesced to this. Otherwise, he would not come. Thinking of this, Qingming lowered his altitude, patrolled around, and locked onto 2 mist-hidden ninjas who were besieging a Konoha Jonin. Judging from the performance of the 2, only one should be a real Jonin, and the other was only at the level of a special Jonin. So, he no longer hesitated, and immediately dived and rushed towards the special Jonin. All of this is long to say, but it actually happened in an instant. However, in such a short time, the other party still reacted. Swoosh, he threw the kunai in his hand, aiming directly at his heart. A perceptive ninja, Qingming murmured, and slightly turned his body to avoid a kunai attack. Then, he threw several shurikens without hesitation, either blocking the opponent's escape route or aiming at his vital points. In short, he was forcing the opponent to death. However, facing such an attack, the mist ninja was not in a hurry, and quickly pulled out a kunai from his waist, knocking away an incoming shuriken. Then, his figure flashed, and he narrowly avoided the attack of the remaining shurikens. At this point, Qingming was basically certain that this person was definitely a special Jonin who was good at perception, otherwise it would be impossible to avoid his attack so easily. But just based on this point, it would be a foolish dream to want to escape from his hands. The distance between the 2 sides quickly narrowed, and when it was less than 5 meters, Qingming drew out the long sword at his waist, and then used the downward force to chop at the opponent. Ding! The crisp sound of metal collision rang out and did not disappear for a long time. Heiichiro felt his arm go numb. Even though he used the force-relieving method just right, and stepped on the ground to create spider-like cracks, he still couldn't stop the force of Qingming's attack. Tick-tick drops of blood slid down the blade in Qingming's hand. Heiichiro tilted his head slightly, glanced at the shallow cut on his shoulder made by Qingming's long sword, and his face became serious. Then, he slammed his feet on the ground, and the whole person retreated backwards like a cannonball. Seeing this, Qingming instantly released the wind style, wind wings, and then a green light flashed on his body, and he performed the instant sword technique and chased after him. Ding! The sound of metal clashing rang out again. Qingming slashed Heizichiro's kunai with a knife, forcing him to retreat several steps again, staggering. As the saying goes, take advantage of your illness to kill you. Qingming did not hesitate at all, and immediately followed up, swinging the long sword in his hand for the third time, aiming directly at the opponent's neck. A trace of chill appeared in front of his neck. Heizichiro did not dare to hesitate and immediately raised the kunai in his hand to block. Ding! Another crisp metal collision sound. However, this time the sound lasted for a short time. Almost at the moment when the kunai and the long sword collided, Qingming retracted the long sword. Then, it was slashed out diagonally. Obviously, the slash that was just a hairline was just a cover, and the real killing move was only used now. Feeling the murderous intention on the blade of Qingming, looking at the tip of the blade getting closer and closer to him, Heizichiro felt difficulty breathing. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Superman's perception saved his life. At the critical moment, Heizichiro leaned back slightly to avoid the end of being pierced in the throat by Qingming's knife. However, his life was saved, but injury was inevitable. With a swish, Qingming's long sword slashed the opponent's cheek, leaving a diagonal scar from his left chin to his right eye. The burning pain came, but Heizichiro had no time to check his injuries, because Qingming's next attack was coming. Heizichiro was unable to deal with it head-on, and could only wave the kunai in his hand to block while retreating to the back. Bang! At a certain moment, Heizichiro felt a pain in his back. Then, he glanced back and saw a crooked tree blocking his retreat. Seeing Qingming's long sword coming, Heizichiro ducked and hid under a thick branch at the critical moment. Although the branch was cut in half by Qingming the next moment, it still bought Heizichiro precious time. He completed the seal at almost the fastest speed in his life, and performed the substitution technique before Qingming's long sword approached. Puff! A pool of water fell. Qingming withdrew the long sword expressionlessly. Then, a green light flashed on his body, and he performed the instant sword technique again. Today is over. Chapter 452, Fierce Battle in the Valley. On the other side, Heizichiro had just dodged Qingming's attack, and before he could stand firmly, he saw a figure suddenly appear in front of him. Who else could it be but Qingming? Instantly, a strong sense of crisis came over him. In Heizichiro's eyes, the moment Qingming appeared, he immediately swung his sword towards him, and the whole action was extremely smooth, without any sense of lag in the middle. Obviously, Qingming was more adept at using the instant sword technique. In fact, it was true. The battle the day before yesterday, plus the practice over the past 2 days, his proficiency in the instant sword technique had been raised from LV6, 5,510,000, to LV6, 8,110,000, and he was not far from being promoted to LV7. And LV7 is almost the limit of the instant sword technique. In other words, his instant sword technique is close to the perfect level. In this way, it is naturally more convenient to perform. At the same time, it is precisely for this reason that he was able to force Heizichiro in front of him to this point in a short time. However, if he wanted to kill the other party, he still needed to use some other means. With a thought, Qingming used the illusion, Sharingan, at the moment when their eyes met. In an instant, a stream of chakra, wrapped in mental power, rushed into the other party's mind through the medium of the eyes. Qingming intended to use this to interfere with Heizichiro's senses and then kill him. However, Heizichiro was a special Jonin who was good at perception after all, and his reaction was still very fast. Almost at the moment he cast the spell, he noticed something unusual. So, he closed his eyes without any hesitation. Not only that, he did not stop blocking in his hand, and he sent out the kunai in his hand completely based on his senses and what he had seen before. Ding! The long sword and kunai collided, making a crisp metal collision sound. The sword swung by Qingming was blocked. However, Heizichiro knew that he was not his opponent in close combat, and he was worried about the influence of the Sharingan illusion, so he did not use much force when resisting. In this way, the force of the long sword in Qingming's hand was transmitted to him through the kunai. With the help of this force, Heizichiro retreated, trying to distance himself. However, he had a good idea, but Qingming did not give him this opportunity. Seeing that his eyes were closed, Qingming did not hesitate at all. He slightly loosened his right hand that was swinging the sword, reducing the force on it, and took a step forward to catch up with Heizuchiro. Then, he stretched out his left palm and pressed a ball of light blue chakra that had condensed at some point on his body. In an instant, severe pain came. Heizuchiro could not help but open his eyes, and at the same time, he spit out a large mouthful of blood, and his breath instantly waned. Qingming's move was not a new move, it was the unprinted ninjutsu, Rasengan. It must be said that in terms of concealment, the Rasengan that he had mastered to level 7 can indeed be called a unique one. The key is that the power of this technique is not bad, and it can have a decisive effect. Qingming had no idea how many people he had tricked with this move. Only a few could defend themselves. And Heizuchiro was obviously not one of them. Looking into Heizuchiro's eyes, Qingming slightly turned his head to avoid the blood spurting out. Then stared at him and used the Genjutsu Sharingan again. This time, Heizuchiro did not dodge. In just a moment, his vision was occupied by a pair of scarlet Sharingans. When he realized that something was wrong and wanted to break free, it was too late. Swoosh! Qingming swung a knife and accurately cut his throat. A strong feeling of suffocation came, pulling Heizuchiro out of the illusion. But when he regained consciousness, he was already breathing less and breathing more. Ha ha ha! A meaningless sound came out of his mouth, and Heizuchiro stared at Qingming unwillingly, but he could do nothing. He staggered back 2 steps and finally fell to the ground powerlessly. Bang! A dull sound came. Qingming glanced at the other's body for the last time, and then he did not stay any longer. He looked around and locked onto the mist-hidden ninja who had cooperated with him to deal with the Konoha Jonin before. Swish! A flash of green light appeared, and Qingming once again performed the instant sword technique, and then the whole person ran towards the man at a very fast speed. Not far away, since Qingming and Heizuchiro fought, Ito Shohei had divided part of his mind and paid attention to Qingming's every move. Seeing that he killed Heizuchiro in such a short time, his heart tightened. And when Qingming focused his attention on him, the tension in his heart became even worse. So, he planned to distance himself from the Konoha Jonin in front of him first, and then make a long-term plan. However, the Konoha Jonin who fought with him was not a fool. How could he miss such a good opportunity? Therefore, he immediately increased the intensity of the attack, pestering him and not letting him leave. For this reason, he even resorted to a strategy that would hurt both sides. This time, Ito Qingming was really in a dilemma. If he stayed, he would inevitably be besieged by Qingming and the Konoha Jonin in front of him. If he left, he would inevitably be injured. And on the battlefield, getting injured is always the most undesirable. Therefore, after a struggle between heaven and man, he chose to stay. Qingming's threat had not arrived after all, and the madness of the Konoha Jonin in front of him was real. He had to deal with this man's attack first. And just with this delay, Qingming came close. At this time, he had no chance to distance himself. Almost without any pause, the moment Qingming arrived, he joined the battle, and together with his Konoha Jonin, he launched a siege on Ito Qingming. Originally, Ito Qingming's strength was very average. Let alone facing Qingming, it was enough to deal with a Konoha Jonin in front of him. Now, he had to face 2 people at the same time, and the result was imaginable. In just 2 or 3 minutes, he showed a decadent trend. Qingming seized the opportunity and swung his sword, leaving a shallow scar on his right arm. Although the scar was shallow, it was a beginning. Since then, he has been completely passive. Apart from defending himself, he had no chance to fight back. Scars appeared on his body, almost suffocating him. Seeing that he was about to die, I don't know if Yasuda Akaku finally made adjustments or just discovered the situation here. In short, support was sent here, to Kirigakure Jonin. However, Qingming didn't take these 2 people seriously at all. After seeing them coming, Qingming didn't hesitate at all and immediately threw Ito Qingming to the Konoha Jonin beside him. And he met the 2 Kirigakure Jonin who came to support. There was no nonsense between the 2 sides, and the battle broke out almost at the moment of contact. The sound of ding-dong rang rapidly, and the longsword and kunai collided, splashing sparks. Qingming almost didn't use ninjutsu, just relying on superb swordsmanship and Sharingan to completely suppress the 2. Under his blade, the 2 men mostly defended and rarely counterattacked. The principle that if you defend too long, you will lose is applicable at any time. The 19 points of constitution attribute gave Qingming far more endurance than ordinary people. Therefore, after a period of fierce collision, Qingming clearly felt the opponent's fatigue. Taking this opportunity, he took the lead in performing Genjutsu Sharingan and forced one person to retreat. Then, at the cost of injuring his shoulder, he gave another Kurigakyojanin a fierce blow. Chapter 453 Killing in Situation. Swish, the sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh and blood rang out. Qingming swung his sword and left a deep scar on the opponent's chest that could be seen to the bone. Ah! The Kurigakyojanin cried out in pain, retracted the kunai he had stabbed, and quickly retreated. Qingming lowered his head slightly and glanced at the wound on his shoulder that was cut by the kunai. Then, he took a step forward and planned to kill the opponent. However, at this moment, the Kurigakyojanin who had just been forced back by him with the Genjutsu Sharingan suddenly stepped forward and blocked his way. Swish, a kunai stabbed straight at him. Qingming paused slightly, raised the longsword in his hand, and blocked it in front of him. Ding! The longsword and kunai collided, making a crisp metal collision sound. Then, neither Qingming nor the opponent retreated. The two of them exerted their strength together, and the blades and kunai rubbed against each other, making a sharp sizzling sound. Sparks burst out from it, piercing the eyes of the two people. After a stalemate, the two retreated at the same time, pulling away from each other. However, the next moment, the two rushed forward again and collided with each other. Ding! The crisp sound of metal collision rang out again. However, this time the two did not stalemate, and they separated the moment they came into contact. Then, they fought again. Ding ding ding! A series of metal collisions rang out. Qingming waved the longsword in his hand and continued to attack. The Kurigakyojanin in front of him tried his best, and although he barely kept up with his speed, he could only defend. This made him very passive. Qingming glanced at the Kurigakyojanin who was injured on his chest and had now retreated to a distance, and secretly said it was a pity. Then, he stopped distracting himself and began to concentrate on dealing with the Kurigakyojanin in front of him. Before, the two opponents were not his opponents, and now there was only one left, so Qingming naturally had an easier time dealing with it. Just a few minutes later, Qingming had an absolute upper hand and left several scars on his body. And he himself was not injured, and even the place on his shoulder that was injured by the previous missed hidden ninja was about to heal itself as time went by. And this is exactly why he dared to use himself as bait to create opportunities. Now, it seems that he can use the same trick again. Qingming thought so in his heart, so in the next battle, while fighting with all his strength, he also deliberately exposed flaws to create opportunities for the opponent. However, I don't know whether he was timid, or saw his plan, or for some other reason. In short, no matter how Qingming tempted him, he just didn't fall for it. This made Qingming a little helpless. Fortunately, the gap in strength between the two sides was here, and even if the opponent didn't take risks, he would not be his opponent. The battle continued for a few minutes again. Under Qingming's crazy attack, the missed hidden ninja was almost unable to hold on. At a closer distance, Qingming could even hear the opponent's heavy breathing. The severe consumption of physical strength made his movements more and more stiff. Finally, at a certain moment, Qingming, who was attacking, saw an opportunity. Without any hesitation, he immediately released the chakra in his body, kicked the ground with both feet, and instantly increased his speed to the maximum, and came in front of him. Looking at Qingming who suddenly appeared, Shimizu Kento was slightly stunned, and then stabbed the kunai in his hand, attacking Qingming's throat. However, although the opponent's movements were fast, they were just average under the observation of Qingming's Sharingan. In addition, this attack was initiated by Qingming, and the opponent's current reaction was also within his expectations, so he dodged it easily. On the contrary, Shimizu Kento was not so good. Qingming's sudden speed directly caught him off guard. Although he stabbed the kunai in his hand in time, he was still a beat late. On the battlefield, victory or defeat sometimes depends on this moment. Qingming turned sideways to avoid the stabbing kunai and swung the longsword in his hand. It can be seen that his blade is wrapped with a layer of light blue airflow, and the airflow exudes a sharp breath. This is not something else, but the result of a large amount of wind escape chakra gathering in friction. Whoosh! The long sword swept across Shimizu Kento's neck. Shimizu Kento leaned back with all his strength to avoid the direct attack of the blade. However, the wind chakra wrapped on it cut his neck. The next moment, a large amount of blood gushed out. Shimizu Kento staggered back 2 steps and put his hand on his neck, as if trying to stop the loss of blood. However, it was useless. Qingming's knife used the inside of the Sharingan to see the right position, not only cutting his carotid artery, but also cutting his throat. In this way, He not only had to bear the consequences of a large amount of blood loss, but also had to endure the pain of suffocation. In this case, without a medical ninja of Tsunade's level to take action in time, it would be basically impossible to survive. And obviously, there was no such ninja in the field. Qingming may have reached Tsunade's level in some aspects of ability, but it is impossible to save the other party. Therefore, he can only wait for death in despair. Looking away from him, Qingming no longer paid attention to him. He glanced at the Konoha Jonin, who had almost defeated Uchiha Qingming and was rushing to other battlefields not far away, and jumped onto the tree. Then, after several more leaps, they reached the top of the treetops. Standing at the highest point, Qingming looked around. It can be seen that the entire valley is now a battlefield, and the defense line that Kurigakure had previously built halfway up the mountain has long since collapsed. Now, the two sides can be said to be in a bin melee. However, because they were well prepared, Konoha generally had the upper hand. But similarly, Kurigakure did not have a one-sided situation. If the current situation continues to develop, it can be foreseen that even if Konoha can win in the end, it will take a long time. And if this is true, then it will fall into the trap of Yasuda Yakuju. What they want to do most now is probably to delay time, and then wait for another group of Kurigakure to flatten the Blackstone stronghold, and then join them, and finally annihilate them. This is not impossible. In fact, it can be said to be the most likely scenario. Although Seino Nobuhisa also deployed people to harass at sea, it is impossible to prevent the other party from approaching the Blackstone stronghold. And once the other party approaches, then with the current defense force of the Blackstone stronghold, it is highly likely that it will not be able to defend. At that time, they will be attacked from both sides, and the result will definitely not be good. Therefore, this battle must not be delayed for too long. And this is the meaning of his existence. With this thought, Qingming no longer wastes time, jumps off the treetop, and then runs straight to another Kurigakure Jonin who is fighting with Konoha Jonin. Thanks to the fact that Seino Nobuhisa has transferred most of the Jonin in the base, there are almost no idle Jonin on the Kurigakure side on the battlefield. In other words, Qingming can play freely without worrying about being besieged. In this way, his strength can definitely be maximized. And this is where Seino Nobuhisa's confidence lies. Chapter 454 The Last Straw. The sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh was heard. Qingming thrust out his sword and hied a mist-hidden ninja in the back. The man felt a loss of life and froze for a moment. Then, without any hesitation, he used up his last bit of strength to take out a detonating talisman from his body and activated it instantly. In front of him, the Konoha Jonin who had just been responsible for restraining the other party saw this and immediately flew back. At the same time, he did not forget to warn Qingming and said, "Be careful. There is a detonating talisman." Hearing this, Qingming did not hesitate at all, tapped the ground with his toes, pulled out his long sword, and retreated a long distance. The next moment, a violent explosion sounded. Red flames appeared, instantly engulfed the mist-hidden ninja, and then spread to all directions. However, after all, it was just a detonating talisman, and the range it could reach was limited, so it did not cause any harm to Qingming and another Konoha Jonin. The two stretched out their hands in front of them to block the incoming shock wave, and when everything returned to calm, they looked at each other tacitly. Then, each of them chose a direction and ran out. At this time, more than 20 minutes had passed since Qingming broke free from his restraints and attacked with all his strength. During this time, he assisted other Konoha Jonins and killed 3 Kurigakure Jonins. This greatly improved the situation on the Konoha side. In fact, this is easy to understand. Every time Qingming kills an enemy, it is equivalent to simultaneously liberating a teammate with equal combat power. And these people will join the battle group of other Jonins. Even if they cannot do it like him, quickly solve the enemy and liberate more teammates. However, they can also ensure that they will not be defeated easily. At the same time, it will make it more difficult for the Kurigakure Jonins who are fighting to get out. In this way, Qingming will have more time. And he will take this opportunity to continue to attack and kill other Kurigakure Jonins. Obviously, this is a snowball process. And Konoha's dilemma was revived by him in this way. It can be predicted that as he kills more and more Jonins, the Kurigakure side will collapse faster and faster. When at a certain moment, other Konoha Jonins can join forces to kill Kurigakure Jonins without Qingming's help, then Kurigakure will not be far from collapse. No other reason Whether Qingming adjusts the target and attacks those mid-level ninjas, or replaces those Konoha Jonins and continues to attack other Kirigakure Jonins. In short, the surviving Kirigakure mid-level ninjas will suffer from the blows from the Jonins. And whether it is Qingming, the super standard Jonin, or other Konoha Jonins, they are not something they can contend with. Therefore, collapse is a matter of time. And now, it is not far from this time point. This time Kirigakure seems to be coming fiercely, but it is divided into two teams after all, which inevitably leads to a decline in the strength of each team. Just like now, although there are many mid-level ninjas in Kirigakure, the Jonins are not as good as the day before yesterday. Like the three powerful ninjas of the Snow Clan, they basically followed Azoyuki and set off from the sea to the Blackstone stronghold. On this side, both the number and strength of the Jonins are average. On the contrary, in order to make this ambush a success, Sano Nobuhisa can be said to have brought most of the Jonins in the base. As one side grows stronger, the other side loses. The comparison of the high-end combat power between the two sides has changed. At first, the two sides may not have obvious advantages and disadvantages, but as Qingming successively killed 5 Jonins of Kirigakure and seriously injured 1, Kirigakure gradually fell into a disadvantage. Now, it depends on who will be the last straw that overwhelms the Kirigakure Jonin. Thinking of this in his heart, Qingming glanced around and quickly locked his eyes on a Kirigakure Jonin. This person's clothes were exposed, and his whole body was covered with white bone spurs. He held a bone sword in his hand and used a physical technique like dancing to attack Uchiha Shisu crazily. That's right, it was Uchiha Shisu. The other party was also pulled away to participate in this ambush. And Qingming also recognized the person who attacked him. Although he didn't know the specific identity, the iconic corpse bone vein still made him understand the other party's origin. If he guessed correctly, he should be a ninja from the hidden mist village Kaguya clan. And the physical skills he performed were the willow dance and Tsubuki dance of the 6 dance secrets of the Kaguya clan. His agile figure and attack speed far beyond ordinary people all show the excellence of this technique. However, Qingming has seen more powerful Kaguya clan ninjas and killed 2 of them, so he didn't think it was a big deal. With this thought, he came to the edge of the battlefield, saw the opportunity, and joined the battle. Originally, Uchiha Shisu's strength was not much worse than the opponent, and now with Qingming's joining, it can be said to be like a tiger with wings. Immediately, Kaguya Katero felt the pressure. He could barely cope with a pair of Sharingan, but not with 2 pairs. The opponent was also lucky. He had always been a ninja from the Uchiha clan, and was besieged because he was afraid of the existence of Sharingan. I never thought that today there would be a time to besiege others. Although the other party may not necessarily want this luck, it has already happened and cannot be changed. Looking at the ninja of the Hyuga clan in front of him, Qingming drew his sword without hesitation, aiming directly at the back of the opponent. The sharp breath flowed on the tip of the knife. Even if Kaguya Katero did not see it, he could feel the murderous intent. However, Qingming chose a very good time. Even if Kaguya Katero wanted to block it, he had no chance. Now, all he can do is dodge as much as possible. However, in this way, he will be completely passive. And Uchiha Shisu, who has the Sharingan, will definitely be able to seize this opportunity to suppress him. After that, Qingming will attack together, and it will take less than a few minutes to kill him. It seems that such a danger was anticipated, and the crazy and bloodthirsty instincts of the Hyuga clan were stimulated. Kaguya Katero did not dodge, but at the cost of being slashed by Uchiha Shisu, he performed another secret technique of the Hyuga clan Karamatsu dance. The next moment, he seemed to have turned into a spinning top, and began to spin at high speed. The exposed bone spurs turned into sharp weapons, attacking Qingming and Uchiha Shisu. Even with a 3 Magatama Sharingan, Uchiha Shisu still had difficulty seeing Kaguya Katero's movements, so he could only dodge. Qingming opened his main Gekyo Sharingan and could see clearly, but it was obviously impossible for him to use this trick at this time, so he could only dodge. But Kaguya Katero didn't seem to want to let them go. After seeing the 2 of them dodge, he immediately chased after them without any hesitation. During this period, his body still maintained a high-speed rotation posture, like a chainsaw, trying to cut Qingming and Uchiha Shisu into countless pieces. Affected by this, Qingming and Uchiha Shisu could only dodge continuously. For a while, the 2 seemed to be in a passive state. However, this was just an appearance. Neither Qingming nor Uchiha Shisu had any abnormality on their faces at this time. There was no other reason. The two of them knew very well that the outburst of the Hyuga clan Jonin in front of them was absolutely limited. And when this round of outburst was over, it would be their chance. At that time, whether to fight or stay would be decided by themselves. Therefore, the two of them were not in a hurry at all, and just quietly waited for the opportunity. Chapter 455, Breaking Limits and Killing. The fact is just as Qingming expected. After a period of madness, Kaguya Katero stopped because of exhaustion. However, with the physical fitness of the Kaguya clan, as long as they give the opponent a period of breathing time, not too long, 1 or 2 minutes will be enough, and they will most likely become lively again. But will Qingming give him this opportunity? The answer is obviously no. Similarly, Uchiha Shisu will not give him this opportunity. Almost at the moment when he stopped spinning and stopped performing the Karamatsu dance, Uchiha Shisu performed his most skilled instant body technique and appeared in front of him at a speed that ordinary people could hardly see clearly. The next moment, the kune in his hand was swung out, aiming directly at the opponent's throat. However, Kaguya Katero and Uchiha Shisu had been entangled for so long that he had a certain understanding of his fighting style and knew that he was amazingly fast, so he had been on guard early in his heart. Therefore, even though Uchiha Shisu is very fast, he still dodged it with his head raised. If his opponent was Uchiha Shisu alone, he could have taken the opportunity to lie low for a while and wait for his physical strength to recover. But unfortunately, this time his opponent had one more person. Almost at the moment when he raised his head to dodge Uchiha Shisu's attack, Qingming appeared behind him. Admittedly, Qingming's speed was not as fast as Uchiha Shisu, but at such a close distance, he was not much slower. Therefore, Kaguya Katero had almost no time to react. At this time, the power of the corpse vein was reflected. Even though Kaguya Katero did not have time to dodge and block Qingming's attack, the moment he sensed the danger, he just moved his mind and manipulated the bones in his body to form a bone armor behind him. Qingming chopped it with a knife, and it actually made a sound of metal clashing. Qingming was unwilling to give up, so he continued to exert force. Then, a harsh friction sound was heard. However, even if he injected a large amount of wind chakra into the long sword, making its sharpness rise to a higher level, he was unable to cut the opponent's bones. From this, it can be seen that his development of his own corpse bone vein is not superficial. After all, it is almost impossible to block his sword without increasing the density of bones to the level of steel. However, although Qingming's long sword did not break his defense, it also left a deep cut on the bone armor. And this requires a lot of chakra to repair. Qingming could not see it from the back, but Uchiha Shisu standing in front saw it clearly. After being stabbed, Kaguya Katero's face was obviously a little pale. This was not caused by other reasons, but by the large amount of chakra consumed in a short period of time. As the saying goes, take advantage of your illness to kill you. Although Uchiha Shisu's temperament is relatively gentle, he was facing his own people. Now it is a life and death battlefield, so he naturally will not hesitate at all. Fire escape, great dragon fire technique. He saw his toes lightly tap the ground, and while flying backwards, he completed the seal and performed this fire escape ninjutsu. Puff a flame spurted out of his mouth. In a flash, they turned into 3 fire dragons, and then roared and pounced on Kaguya Katero from the left, middle and right directions. Obviously, Uchiha Shisu saw that physical attacks were ineffective, so he switched to ninjutsu attacks. Before, when the two fought, he didn't have much chance because of Kaguya Katero's entanglement. But now, with Qingming's assistance, he can do whatever he wants. When Qingming saw this scene, his eyes lit up slightly. In his pupils, the 3 Magatama turned slightly, and he learned the upgraded version of this fire style, dragon fire technique in an instant. Then, on this panel, the already perfect fire style, dragon fire technique suddenly changed from fire style, dragon fire technique, LV5, 0/0, to fire style, great dragon fire technique, LV5, 1/5000. Obviously, this is a breakthrough. Qingming is very satisfied with this. However, now is not the time to check its details. You know, he is standing behind Kaguya Katero now, and Kaguya Katero is sandwiched between him and Uchiha Shisu. The attack launched by Uchiha Shisu can naturally hurt him. So, it's better to leave the place as soon as possible. With a thought, Qingming put away his sword and retreated, suddenly widening the distance between him and Kaguya Katero. The next moment, 3 fire dragons rushed over. Kaguya-Kotaro's figure flashed and avoided the attacks of 2 of the fire dragons, but facing the 3rd fire dragon, he could not avoid it no matter what. In desperation, he could only control his own bones to form an arm shield in front of him. Boom! The fire dragon hit it, making a bang, and a large amount of flames spread out, bypassing the arm shield and sweeping towards Kaguya-Kotaro behind. In the raging flames, Kaguya-Kotaro rushed out. It can be seen that most of his clothes have been burnt at this time, hanging on his body like rags. In addition, his skin is also mostly charred, and it is obvious that he was seriously injured. He was a ninja from the Kaguya clan, and he inherited the ability of the corpse vein, which strengthened his physique to a certain extent. If it were an ordinary fragile ninja, he would probably be lying down now. However, it was not much different. Almost at the moment when he escaped, Qingming made up for the attack. Without waiting for the long sword to be put away, he raised his left hand and completed the fire-style, Phoenix fire technique with a single-handed seal. A large number of fireballs were spit out by him, like flowers scattered by a fairy, hitting Kaguya-Kotaro. Sensing the danger, Kaguya-Kotaro immediately dodged. Thanks to his long-term practice of willow dance and Tsubaki dance, he was very flexible. Even if he was injured, he dodged most of the fireballs. As for those that he didn't dodge, he also resisted them with the help of the corpse vein. Puffy spat out blood again. Kaguya-Kotaro stared at Qingming and Uchiha Shisa with fierce eyes. After a short confrontation, he did not choose to escape, but once again activated the power of the corpse bone vein, pulled out 2 bone swords from his body, and attacked the 2. Sure enough, he is a madman, Qingming muttered when he saw this, and then without any hesitation, he raised his sword to meet him. Compared with Uchiha Shisu, his close combat ability is obviously stronger, so it is more appropriate for him to take the lead. As for Uchiha Shisu, he only needs to look for opportunities to attack wholeheartedly. Uchiha Shisu's combat quality is not low. Even if the two did not communicate, he still understood Qingming's meaning at the first time. So, at the moment when Qingming made a move, he quietly pulled away with the flash body technique. The next moment, the sound of ding-dong rang out, and Qingming exerted his swordsmanship to the limit and fought with Kaguya-Kotaro. Time passed by minute. Uchiha Shisu never made a move. Just when Kaguya-Kotaro almost lost his mind and tried his best to deal with Qingming, he made a move. And this move was a sure kill. Ding! Qingming and Kaguya-Kotaro collided with each other again. This time, Kaguya-Kotaro did not retreat, but used all his strength to try to force him back. In just a moment, Qingming realized that this was a great opportunity. So, risking being pierced through the body by the bone spurs controlled by him, he also used his strength and did not retreat a single step to fight with him. Seeing this, Kaguya-Kotaro's bloodshot eyes recovered for a moment, and he immediately controlled the bones in his chest to pierce a few holes in Qingming's body. However, at this moment, Uchiha Shisa performed the instant body technique and used his amazing speed to quietly touch behind Kaguya-Kotaro. The next moment, the kune in his hand pierced through Kaguya-Kotaro's back accurately. Suffering from this severe injury, Kaguya-Kotaro violently spit out a large mouthful of blood, and his breath also weakened. Seeing this scene, Qingming seized the opportunity and put away the knife and slashed it diagonally. Swish! The knife light was eerie. In just a moment, he cut open a hole in Kaguya-Kotaro's carotid artery. A large amount of blood gushed out, and the bone sword in Kaguya-Kotaro's hand fell to the ground. He used his hand to cover the wound on his neck. However, he could not stop the blood from flowing. In the end, his eyes widened and he fell to the ground unwillingly. Chapter 456 Plan B. At the moment when Kaguya-Kotaro died, all the nearby mist ninjas who were watching the battle situation here couldn't help but tremble in their hearts, and the fighting movement seemed to stop for a moment. It is true that most of the ninjas of the Kaguya clan advocate violence, like killing, are bloodthirsty, and even crazy. Even people in the same village don't like them very much. But it is undeniable that on the battlefield, they are a symbol of strength. Therefore, many mist ninjas regard them as spiritual pillars, especially when there are no other strong people on the field. But now, this pillar has fallen. From this, it can be imagined how big a blow the mist ninjas have suffered. However, Qingming will not pity them. He just wants to take advantage of the other party's illness and kill the other party. Therefore, after just a short stay and a breath, Qingming separated from Uchiha Shisa and rejoined the battlefield of another Jonin. Looking at his back as he left, and looking at the Konoha ninjas who were still fighting hard around him, Uchiha Shisu sighed lightly and joined the ranks of besieging other mist ninjas. With the addition of these two masters, the Kurigakure side can almost be described as a rout. First, it was the battlefield of the Jonin. Facing the siege of more and more Konoha Jonin, they gradually became exhausted and began to be injured and died frequently. The defeat of the Jonin led to a sharp drop in the morale of the mid and low-level ninjas, and they could not exert 60% to 70% of their full strength. On the contrary, the mid and low-level ninjas of Konoha saw the dawn of victory and swung their kunai with more force. As one side gained and the other lost, the Kurigakure side was defeated step by step, in the valley. On a big tree. Yasuda Akiju saw this scene and his face was terribly gloomy. He originally thought that with the strength of his men, he could hold on for an hour or two. But now, he couldn't even hold on for an hour. This instantly ruined his plan to delay time. Yasuda Akiju's eyes swept across the entire scene, passing over those Konoha mid and low-level ninjas, and finally fixed on Qingming and Uchiha Shisu. He roughly summarized that there were two reasons for the current situation. The first was that Konoha unexpectedly brought most of the ninjas in the Blackstone stronghold. And this undoubtedly caught him off guard. He thought that Konoha might ambush. After all, there was a good observer like Qingming. According to their marching route, it was normal to ambush 1 or 2 times. But the key to the problem was that Konoha was so radical that it really transferred most of its combat power. This reached the limit they could bear. The second reason was the two masters Qingming and Uchiha Shisu. Uchiha Shisu was fine. Although he had the nickname of Instant Body Shisu and was not weak, he was entangled by Kaguya Ikatero in the early stage and did not cause much damage to his own ninjas. But Qingming was different. He killed Heizuchiro alone at the beginning. After that, he teamed up with another Konoha Jonin to severely injure Ito Shohei, causing him to die at the hands of that Konoha Jonin. After that, he faced the siege of Shimizu Kenta and another Kurigakure Jonin, and directly severely injured one of them and killed Shimizu Kenta. This left him with no extra Jonin available. At this point, the situation began to become tense. After that, Qingming assisted other Konoha Jonins non-stop and killed 3 Kurigakure Jonins in a row. At this point, they were completely at a disadvantage. Just now, he joined forces with Uchiha Shisu to kill their last support, Kaguya Ikatero. At this point, the last straw that overwhelmed them appeared. In summary, it can be said that Qingming was the culprit who destroyed his plan. It is for this reason that Yasuda Akiku looked at Qingming with hatred. However, in this hatred, there is also a deep fear hidden. Obviously, the strength shown by Qingming left a deep impression on him. Suppressing his inner irritability, Yasuda Akiku took a deep breath, and then without hesitation, he immediately said to the messenger Chunin beside him, "Immediately tell all teams to execute Plan B." Plan B. Hearing this, the mist-hidden Chunin was shocked and hesitated. "Captain, is it too early to implement Plan B now?" "Maybe." However, before he could finish his words, Yasuda Akiku interrupted, "Don't say anything, execute the order immediately." "Yes, Captain." Hearing Yasuda Akiku's impatient words, Yokoyama Yukio dared not say anything more. After responding, he immediately went down to convey Yasuda Akiku's instructions. Looking at her leaving back, Yasuda Akiku's eyes were deep. After a long time, he whispered to himself, "Now is the last chance. If we delay any further, it will not be as simple as sacrificing a few people." That's right, the so-called Plan B is actually to cut off the tail and survive. That is, some mist ninjas will sacrifice their lives to stop the enemy's pursuit, thereby covering the evacuation of the large forces. There is no doubt that this is a plan that he had to make. At that time, when he made this plan, Yasuda Akiku didn't think that he would use it. It was just that his habit of thinking about defeat before thinking about victory made him make such a backup plan. Bang! Yasuda Akiku stretched out his fist and hit the tree trunk next to him, his eyes showing reluctance. Unfortunately, no matter how unwilling he was, he could only do this. Because he knew clearly that his side was doomed, even though he could still barely hold on now, it would eventually be a dream. In this world where great power belongs to oneself, war is indeed related to ordinary ninjas, but in the end, it will always be the high-end combat power that can determine the outcome. Now, on their side, the battle between the senior ninjas has completely failed, and dragging it on will only lead to chronic death. If they don't retreat as soon as possible, even if they can wait for the support of friendly forces, they will not be able to complete the original plan in the end. That is, cooperate with friendly forces to annihilate the attacking Konoha ninjas. Therefore, in order to avoid meaningless consumption of his subordinates, he decided to retreat for the time being. Inhale, exhale, take a deep breath, then exhale slowly. Yasuda Akaja calmed down, stopped thinking too much, and concentrated on issuing various instructions to prepare for retreat. Time passed by minute. Soon, a quarter of an hour passed. Although the Kirigakure side did not have ninjas as good at mind communication techniques as the Yamanaka clan, they also had their own way of quickly conveying orders. Therefore, although the battlefield was very chaotic, they still accurately conveyed Yasuda Akaja's orders to everyone who knew about Plan B. When these people heard the orders, they either looked dead, or were unwilling, or hysterical. In short, after a quarter of an hour, all preparations were completed. Finally, a shrill whistle sounded in the field. This was the signal for the plan to start. Immediately, some of the Kirigakure ninjas began to withdraw, while others filled the vacancies they left behind and tried their best to stop the pursuit of the Konoha ninjas. At first, the Konoha ninjas wanted to chase those who left the Kirigakure ninjas. But when the remaining mist ninja used chakra regardless of consumption, and performed various ninjutsu on a large scale and at a high frequency to attack them, they gave up the pursuit. Because of this, Plan B of the Mist Hidden Village was successful. Although some of the mist ninjas who were supposed to retreat failed to evacuate smoothly, most of the people in the plan escaped safely. And this was enough. Yasuda Akaku looked at the people around him, without any nonsense, and directly ordered, "Retreat." After that, he took the lead and rushed forward. Seeing this, the others immediately followed. Soon, the mist ninjas disappeared from the side of the Konoha ninjas. And the direction they left was the direction of the Blackstone stronghold, which was the other end of the valley. That's right, these evacuated mist ninjas did not choose to return to Fiyu town, but continued to move forward, walked out of the valley, and ran towards the Blackstone stronghold. Obviously, Yasuda Akaku has not given up, or this is part of Plan B indeed. Plan B was to cut off the tail and survive, but it was not to withdraw directly, but to first meet up with another team of mist ninjas, and then attack Konoha's Blackstone stronghold together. Chapter 457, Pursuit. A quarter of an hour later. When the valley fell into peace again, all the ninjas belonging to the hidden mist village had died. Swish, a figure appeared beside Qingming. The person was none other than Shinobuhisa. He looked at Qingming and said without any nonsense, "Just now those mist ninjas rushed to the base. I need you to follow them and monitor their actions." "Just monitor?" Qingming turned his head and asked lightly. Shinobuhisa paused for a moment before continuing, "No, if they get to the base before us and launch an attack, then you have to delay time for us as much as possible." Hearing this request, Qingming frowned slightly and said, "I'm afraid that I alone will not be enough. This time is different from the raid on the hidden mist village 2 days ago. Both the number of manpower and the overall strength are much stronger. If he rashly launches an attack, he will probably suffer. Although he is not worried about his own safety with the existence of Amano-yu, he does not want to take this risk." Hearing Qingming say this, Shinobuhisa hurriedly said, "Of course you are not the only one. Just when they left, I had already sent out 2 teams. At this time, they are following those mist ninjas. When necessary, you can order them to act with you. In addition, I will immediately organize a part of my manpower to pursue them at the fastest speed. You just need to delay for a while, is that so?" Hearing the other party's words, Qingming pondered for a moment and finally nodded. The other party has said so much? If he still refuses, it would be a bit unreasonable. What's more, with these people around, he really doesn't have much danger. In this case, it's nothing to go there. With this thought, Qingming stood up, shook off the blood on the blade, and then put it back into the scabbard. Then, looking at Shinobuhisa, he said, "Okay, I'll set off now." After that, without waiting for Shinobuhisa to speak again, he raised his hands, quickly completed the seal, and performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wind wings. With a swish, a pair of light blue chakra wings appeared behind him. Qingming controlled the wings and flapped them gently, then the whole person flew high into the sky. After circling a circle, he immediately flew in the direction where the mist ninjas left. Looking at Qingming's departing back, Shinobuhisa breathed a sigh of relief. Then, without staying any longer, he immediately organized people and chased the mist ninja team in front at the fastest speed. Time passed by minute. On the other side, although the mist ninjas were traveling fast, They were not as fast as Qingming's flying speed. In addition, the general direction was determined, so Qingming quickly found the other party. But before he could get close, a familiar chakra broke into his mind with mental power. The next moment, the voice of Yamanaka Aoi sounded, "Qingming Junin, you are here." That's right, the owner of this chakra was none other than Yamanaka Aoi. And the other party was in the team chasing the mist ninjas. Qingming heard the other party's voice, nodded, and then replied in his mind, "It's me, where are you now?" When he said this, he had already approached the sky above the Kurigakure team, then opened his Sharingan and scanned downwards, trying to find their traces. Just at this moment, a slightly dazzling light shot into his eyes, making him close his eyes involuntarily. However, the light did not last too long, just shook him for a moment, and then disappeared. Qingming opened his eyes again, looked in the direction of the light, and then saw more than 30 Konoha ninjas. Obviously, these are the two teams mentioned by Shinobuhisa. The light that just pierced his eyes was sunlight reflected by small objects such as mirrors. The purpose was naturally to attract his attention. It must be said that although the opponent's means are not very clever, they are very practical, and the most important thing is that they are still very hidden. Except for him who was illuminated by the reflected light, no one else could find anything unusual. Just like the Kurigakure in front, they did not notice the movement here. Qingming withdrew his gaze from them, and then said to Yamanaka Aoi in his mind, "You continue to follow the other party, I will go to the front to take a look." "Okay, Qingming Junin, be careful." Yamanaka Aoi heard this and paused for a moment before replying. Yet, Qingming responded with a final sound and dispelled the other party's mental power and chakra. Then, with a slight flap of his wings, he suddenly lowered his altitude and approached the Kurigakure team. Below, seeing him approach, there was a little commotion in the Kurigakure team. However, Qingming only made a feint and raised his altitude again. This happened 2 or 3 times in a row, and the marching speed of the Kurigakure ninjas below was significantly reduced. However, after Yasuda Akaku gave an order, the Kurigakure ninjas regained their composure again, no longer paying attention to Qingming's harassment, and began to travel at their original speed. Qingming tried a few more times, and seeing that he could not interfere with the other party, he simply did not continue to take the risk of approaching, but flapped his wings and raised his altitude again. After circling around their heads a few times again, Qingming felt a little bored. After thinking for a while, he formed a seal and performed the heart communication technique. After explaining a few words to Yamanaka Aoi, he flew towards the direction of the Blackstone stronghold. He planned to go back there to see if the other team of mist ninjas in Fiayu Town had arrived. Although according to the time calculation, the other party should not have arrived yet, Qingming was still a little worried after not seeing it with his own eyes. It just so happened that nothing would happen here for a while, and it would not take him long to go back and forth. Therefore, Qingming did not follow Nobuhisa Sano's order to keep monitoring the other party. Below, seeing him fly away, Yasuda Akaju's face was not only without any joy, but also a little gloomy. He was still thinking, could he take the opportunity to raid the Blackstone stronghold? Now it seems that this idea is almost impossible. With the speed shown by the other party, they can definitely fly to the Blackstone stronghold before them and pass on the information. In this way, without the suddenness, if they insist on attacking the Blackstone stronghold, they are likely to face a pincer attack from both sides. At that time, it will be difficult to get away. Therefore, he couldn't take this risk. Ah, what a pity. Yasuda Akaju sighed, retracted his gaze, and thought to himself, it seems that I can only follow the original plan and meet with Captain Osawa. However, in this way, he would not have any credit. He would even have to apologize for the sacrifices of the Kurigakure ninjas. When he thought of this, Yasuda Akaju's face was not very good. On the other side, after more than 10 minutes of flying, Qingming finally arrived at the Blackstone base. Chapter 458 Reconnaissance in Action. Blackstone Stronghold. Above, Qingming arrived quietly. Looking at the slightly tense but still orderly positions below, he breathed a sigh of relief. Since there was no fighting here, it meant that the other team of mist ninjas had not arrived yet as expected. And then, as long as Shinobuhisa and others could get back in time before them, the crisis could be almost resolved. Below, some Konoha ninjas seemed to have discovered his traces, and 1 or 2 of them looked at him. Qingming didn't want to pay attention to them, but considering that they might need to resist the attacks of the mist ninjas later, he thought about it and landed. and at the moment when his feet landed on the ground, a Konoha Jonin performed the instant body technique and rushed over. As soon as he appeared, he said, "Qingming, how are you guys?" His voice was a little anxious, and in addition to hope, there was also a little worry in his tone. Qingming knew what he was worried about, so he didn't keep him in suspense and said directly, "Don't worry, Captain Mori, the ambush was very successful, and many enemies were killed and wounded." Captain Sano is now leading his men back. Hearing Qingming's answer, Mori Mutetsuchi breathed a sigh of relief, and he was much more relaxed. Seeing him like this, Qingming frowned slightly, fearing that the other party would be careless, so he changed the subject and said, "By the way, some of the enemies have escaped and are now rushing towards this side at full speed. It is not clear whether they will directly attack you. In short, you should be more prepared." What? Hearing Qingming's words, Mori Mutetsuchi's heart tightened. Beside him, some other Konoha ninjas who had pricked up their ears to listen to the conversation between the two also changed their expressions when they heard the news, and immediately became very alert. Seeing their reactions like this, Qingming nodded secretly. As the saying goes, a journey of 100 miles begins with a single step. Qingming didn't want these people to fail at the final stage. Therefore, the pressure that should be given should still be given. Finally, it was Moriki Tetsuchi who reacted first and asked him about the situation of Yasuda Akaku and others. Qingming did not hide it and immediately told him what he had observed. It is true that Yasuda Akaku and others who carried out the plan of cutting off the tail for survival suffered a great loss of strength, but for Moriki Tetsuchi and others who are now staying in the Blackstone base, they are still a force that cannot be ignored. The most important thing is that according to the latest intelligence, another team of mist ninjas will soon come from the sea. If both sides come together and attack them, their situation will be dangerous. The more he thought about it, the uglier Moriki Tetsuchi's face looked. Seeing him like this, Qingming was also afraid that the pressure would be too great and the other party would be overwhelmed, and then misjudge the situation. So, he continued, "Don't worry, we have 2 teams of ninjas chasing behind, and Captain Sano has also sent a team of people who are rushing over at full speed. Those people are unlikely to attack you directly." Really? Hearing this news, although Moriki Tetsuchi's face was still serious, it was still a little better than before. Seeing the change in his expression, Qingming knew that the matter had been settled. So, he ignored the other party, said goodbye to him, and then performed the wind style, wind wings again, flew high into the sky, and flew towards the sea. That's right, he planned to find another team of mist ninjas to see where they are now. As the saying goes, only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win every battle. Since he has such a useful ability as wind style, wind wings, he naturally wants to have all the information in his hands. In this way, it will be convenient for him to make decisions. In addition, he also wants to see whether the harassment team arranged by Shinobuhisa has delayed the mist ninjas. In a flash, nearly half an hour passed. Because he flew high enough and had a wide field of vision, Qingming didn't spend much time to find another team of mist ninjas. And when he arrived, he found that a battle was going on here. On the sea, some mist ninjas broke away from the warships and were besieging several Konoha ninjas. Qingming recognized these people. They were the ninjas sent by Shinobuhisa to carry out the harassment mission. However, as far as he knew, there were quite a few of them. But now, Qingming opened his Sharingan and carefully observed the surroundings. He did not find any traces of other people. It seemed that there were only these few people in the field. I don't know whether the others are hiding in the dark, ready to act, or have already sacrificed. In short, he can only see these few people. And with the strength of these few people, it is obviously impossible to stop the advancement of the Mist Ninja fleet. Just like now, although the Mist Ninja has sent some people to deal with them, the fleet as a whole has not stopped at all and is still continuing to sail. At this speed, the other party will most likely arrive at the periphery of the Blackstone stronghold before Shinobuhisa and others return. At that time, they will meet with the Yasuda Akajo and others, and then the Blackstone stronghold will be in danger. And this, without a doubt, is what Qingming does not want to see. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind, and Qingming finally sighed and said, "Hey, in the end I have to take action." With this thought, Qingming no longer hesitated, and immediately controlled the chakra wings behind him. The whole person dived at the fastest speed of 40 meters per second towards the Mist Ninjas who were besieging the Konoha Ninjas. As for why he didn't go to trouble the fleet? It's very simple, it's too dangerous for him to be alone. This time, The Kurigakure fleet is not like 2 days ago. There were only a few people on it, and the strength was low, so it was easy to deal with. Now, these Kurigakure warships are full of incoming Kurigakure ninjas. In this case, if he attacked rashly, he might not be in any danger of life, but he might suffer a little. Moreover, doing so can only delay them for a while at most, and can't cause any substantial harm to them at all. Qingming will not do such a thankless thing. On the contrary, if he rescued these Konoha ninjas first, with Emma's assistance, he would have much more room to play. Apart from anything else, just these few people acting as cannon fodder to attract the attention of Kurigakure can reduce a lot of risks for him. At the same time, it can also win him more opportunities. And as long as he seizes these opportunities and destroys 1 or 2 Kurigakure warships, he can have a great impact on Kurigakure's actions. Isn't this much better than simple harassment? It happened in a flash. Just when Qingming was taking action, Kurigakure below finally found his trace. Without Qing, the ninja with transplanted white eyes, even if Azayuki sent people to stare at the sky because he was afraid of his existence, it was still too late when he found him. At this time, he was not far from the fleet. And it would take some time for these observation posts to pass this news to Azayuki and make corresponding arrangements. And this time is enough for Qingming to make up his mind and launch an attack. Therefore, when those Kurigakure ninjas realized his arrival and were on high alert, he had already arrived above the battlefield. Swish, 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 several shurikens flew out. Below, a mist-hidden ninja sensed the danger and immediately broke away from the group of ninjas besieging Konoha and dodged to the side. However, Qingming was waiting for this moment. Almost at the moment he dodged, Qingming completed the seal, opened his mouth and performed the ninjutsu, fire style, dragon fire style. Admittedly, in this environment, the power of the fire style ninjutsu would be reduced, but as long as there was enough chakra, everything would be fine. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459, Killing. Boom! A giant fire dragon flew out, aiming directly at the Kurigakure Chunin. Feeling the scorching heat coming from above his head, the dodging Kurigakure Chunin's expression changed drastically. He wanted to avoid the fire dragon's attack, but he didn't have time. At the same time, because he had just left the battle, he had distanced himself from the other Kurigakure ninjas. Therefore, the others had no time to help him. No, as if he had anticipated his fate, the Kurigakure Chunin let out an unwilling roar. However, it was useless. The next moment, the fire dragon hid him and pressed him on the sea surface. A large amount of seawater rushed in, trying to swallow him up. However, the raging flames generated by the fire dragon after hitting the enemy instantly evaporated the seawater and burned the Kurigakure Chunin to death. Feeling the opponent's rapidly disappearing life breath, Qingming murmured, "Who said that fire escape can't kill people? Did it kill one, Qingming Junin?" Several Konoha ninjas saw Qingming suddenly appear and kill one person in an instant, and they were so excited that they spoke out. However, Qingming ignored these people. After muttering, he gathered his mind, released the wind style, wind wings, and let himself land on the sea. It is true that launching an asymmetric attack on the enemy in the air can maximize one's own safety, but the damage it can cause is extremely limited. His goal is to liberate these Konoha ninjas, and harassment alone will not do. Therefore, he has to fight head-on. Bang! Almost at the moment when his feet landed on the sea, he drew out the long sword at his waist, and then performed the instant sword technique and came in front of another Kurigakure Chunin. Whoosh! The knife flashed. Qingming slashed straight at the opponent's neck. During this time, seeing this Kurigakure Chunin, he immediately activated the Sharingan and performed the phantom sword technique. Immediately, the knife swung by Qingming became 3 knives in the eyes of this Kurigakure Chunin. Although they were all slashed from the same direction, there was a sequence. The Kurigakure Chunin couldn't tell which of the 3 swords was the real one, so he hesitated a little when blocking. And it was this hesitation that gave Qingming the opportunity to slash his chest with a sword. Swish! The sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh and blood was heard. A deep wound that could be seen to the bone quietly appeared on the chest of the Kurigakure Chunin. A large amount of blood gushed out and fell on the sea, dyeing a large area of seawater red. Ah! The intense pain awakened the Kurigakure Chunin, and he couldn't help but let out a cry of pain. Unfortunately, the sound just came out and stopped abruptly. It turned out that at the moment he woke up, Qingming turned his wrist, and the longsword in his hand changed from chopping to slashing, instantly cutting his throat. Plop! The kunai in his hand fell. The Kurigakure Chunin reached out to cover his neck and staggered back 2 steps. Finally, he fell headfirst into the sea. At this moment, the scene was quiet. Whether it was the Kurigakure ninja or the Konoha ninja, they all stared at Qingming without blinking, their eyes full of surprise. They really didn't expect that Qingming would kill 2 Chunins the moment he appeared. You know, those who were sent by Azayuki to deal with the Konoha harassment team members. Even if they were just Chunins, were not bad. But now, these people were killed by Qingming like chickens, and they were easily killed in an instant. How could they not be surprised? After being surprised, the reactions of both sides were different. Konoha was happy, and the Kurigakure ninja was afraid. However, Qingming didn't care what they thought. He looked up and glanced at the dozen Kurigakure ninjas who had just jumped off the warship in the distance and were rushing towards this side, and thought to himself, we must fight quickly and decisively. With this thought, he did not hesitate at all and immediately performed the shadow clone technique. Bang! Accompanied by a burst of chakra smoke, the Qingming in the field turned from 1 to 6. Without waiting for the Kurigakure ninjas to distinguish who was real and who was fake, Qingming sent 2 of his shadow clones to rush towards the Kurigakure ninjas who were rushing in from a distance, trying to stop them outside. At the same time, he took the remaining 3 shadow clones and killed the nearby Kurigakure ninjas together. The next moment, the battle broke out again. It was not until this time that these Kurigakure ninjas and Konoha ninjas reacted and continued to fight. However, with the addition of Qingming this time, the pressure on several Konoha ninjas was significantly reduced. Similarly, with Emma's assistance, Qingming also found it easier to find the flaws of the opposite Kurigakure ninjas. In just a dozen seconds, he found an opportunity. At this time, he was teaming up with a Konoha special Jonin to deal with a Kurigakure Jonin. Seeing the opponent attacking him, Qingming did not hesitate and immediately dodged and retreated to avoid the attack. At the same time, the Konoha special Jonin next to him seized the opportunity and attacked the Kurigakure Jonin from the side. The Kurigakure Jonin had no choice but to wave the kunai in his hand to block. At this time, Qingming stomped his right foot on the sea. The next moment, a figure appeared in front of the Kurigakure Jonin, and then swung the longsword in his hand. Sensing the danger, the Kurigakure Jonin turned his head to look. At this moment, Qingming activated his Sharingan, an array of light flashed on the blade, and the illusion sword technique was performed by him. Immediately, the Kurigakure Jonin's mind was affected, his senses were affected, and a residual image of Qingming's longsword appeared in his vision. However, he was a Jonin after all, and whether it was mental strength, reaction speed, or combat experience, he was much stronger than the Kurigakure Chunin. Almost at the moment of being hit, he knew that he would definitely not be able to resist it next. Therefore, after breaking free from the influence of the illusion sword technique, he did not hesitate, and immediately tapped the sea surface with his toes, and the whole person flew backwards. But Qingming was waiting for this opportunity. Do it, as Qingming gave the order through the mind communication technique. Not far away, a shadow clone suddenly ignored the attack of the Kurigakure Jonin in front of him, raised his hand to form a seal, and instantly performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wind blade. However, this wind blade was not aimed at him, but at the Kurigakure Jonin who had just been forced back by Qingming. A strong sense of crisis came over him, and Akira Yasuke's heart was pounding. Almost instinctively, he lowered his body. The next moment, a wind blade passed over his head and cut off a few strands of his hair. Akira Yasuke's heart was pounding. However, before he could show the joy of surviving the disaster on his face, a figure appeared in front of him. Akira Yasuke looked up. If it wasn't Qingming, who else could it be? Qingming looked at the other party, opened his mouth slightly, and slowly uttered 2 words, "Goodbye." The next moment, a harsh friction sound rang out, and a gust of wind came. Akira Yasuke glanced and saw a huge shuriken in the palm of Qingming's right hand. Its entire body seemed to be made entirely of chakra, and it was spinning wildly at this moment. It was tearing the surrounding air, driving the strong wind, and making a harsh sound. This is, Akabane Yasuke looked at the wind style, Rasenshuriken in Qingming's hand, and his pupils suddenly shrank as if he had thought of something. Then, he shouted loudly, "No, His voice was the same as that of the mist-hidden ninja who was first killed by Qingming with the fire-style, dragon fire technique, full of unwillingness. Unfortunately, this could not change his ending. In an instant, Qingming stretched out his right hand and pressed on the other person, and the wind-style, Shuriken then turned into a ball of energy light, wrapping the other person up. Inside it, countless chakra needles that were difficult to detect with the naked eye flew wildly, killing the other person at the cellular level. Chapter 460 Cooperation. After killing the Kirigakure Jonin in front of him cleanly, Qingming cast his eyes on another Kirigakure Jonin not far away. At this time, he had just sent the kunai in his hand into the body of the shadow clone who performed the wind-style, wind blade. Bang, with a ball of chakra exploding, the shadow clone disappeared. At the same time, the scene of the other party fighting with the Kirigakure Jonin appeared in Qingming's mind. Although it was not long, it was enough for Qingming, who had the Sharingan, to serve as a reference. Without any hesitation, Qingming immediately said to the Konoha special Jonin beside him, "Follow me." After saying that, he used a flash sword technique to kill the Kirigakure Jonin. Seeing Qingming coming, Omura Ken immediately came up without any hesitation. Soon, the two fought together. Ding ding dang dang. For a time, the sound of metal clashing continued in the field. However, although Omura Ken did not retreat, he learned from Akabane Yasuke's lesson. He dodged Qingming's attack if he could, and would only block it if he couldn't, and would never fight back. Obviously, he had only one purpose, which was to delay time. And with such a full-strength defensive posture, even Qingming would not be able to find a chance to break through for a while. What a Jonin is. Just now, the reason why Akabane Yasuke was defeated was that he was besieged by Qingming and the special Jonin of Konoha, and two fists could not beat four hands. Secondly, Qingming and the shadow clones were constantly communicating through the heart communication technique, and they cooperated so well that they created an opportunity for Qingming. Otherwise, even with his strength, it would be impossible to kill the opponent in such a short time. Just like this, he lost a shadow clone. It can be said that any Jonin is not easy to kill. Especially when this Jonin is focused on defense, it is difficult to break through his defense unless he uses super standard power. And what Qingming lacks now is time. However, it was impossible for him to use the Mangekyo Sharingan like this. He didn't have no helpers now. Just when Qingming was thinking this, the Konoha special Jonin finally joined the battle, and as soon as he appeared, he took the position of Qingming. In an instant, Qingming understood what he meant. So, he decisively gave up the position of the main attack. Then, he began to wander around Omura, and from time to time, he assisted his teammates and began to look for the opponent's flaws. In this regard, the Uchiha clan's Sharingan is absolutely professional. Qingming pushed the 3 Magatama Sharingan to the limit. In his eyes, every move of Omura in front of him seemed to be slowed down and clearly visible. With strong insight, Qingming gradually grasped the opponent's behavior habits. And taking advantage of the opportunity of his teammates to attack with all their strength, Qingming also began to put pressure. Time passed by minute. At a certain moment, when this Konoha special Jonin ignored the stabbing kunai and suddenly counterattacked Omura, Qingming keenly noticed that Omura Ken's expression suddenly changed, as if he had thought of some bad memories. The next moment, he took back the kunai in his hand and blocked it in front of him. A ding sound rang out, and the kunai collided with each other, making a crisp metal collision sound, which lasted for a long time. At this time, Qingming's pupils slightly dilated, and he said to himself, "Good opportunity." A flash of green light suddenly appeared, and the instant sword technique was performed by him. Qingming's figure appeared behind Omura Ken in an instant. Then, he swung the longsword in his hand. A large amount of wind escape chakra was poured into the longsword by him, rubbing against each other, forming a wind blade visible to the naked eye at the blade. A strong sense of crisis came over him, and Omura Ken didn't need to look back to imagine that a longsword was slashing at his back at this time. This is what the so-called like a thorn in the back means. Almost instinctively, Omura gave up the confrontation with the special Jonin in front of him, and dodged the attack of the long sword behind him with a sideways dive. However, he dodged Qingming's attack, but he also exposed his flank to Qingming's teammates without any cover. Almost without any hesitation, the Konoha special Jonin swung the kunai that he had just retracted again. Swish, the sound of the sharp blade cutting through flesh and blood sounded. Bits of blood fell. Omura suddenly saw a scar on his right arm, not deep or shallow. Immediately, A burning pain came. But Kenomura didn't care to check the wound at all, because Qingming, who missed the knife, was now making hand seals, obviously to perform some ninjutsu. Looking at Qingming's hand seals, Kenomura didn't have time to think too much. He raised his hands and made hand seals at a rapid speed, and performed the ninjutsu at an unprecedented speed, water style, water array wall. With a puff, a wall of water rose from the sea and stood in front of him. At the same time, a flame spewed out from Qingming's mouth, and it faintly turned into the shape of a fire dragon. Seeing this scene, Omura Ken was overjoyed, secretly thinking that he had made the right bet. Although the water style, water array wall can also block the attacks of other ninjutsu, it is undoubtedly the best against the fire style. He also saw the seal made by Qingming, and then thought of the fire style, dragon fire technique he had performed not long ago, so he guessed that Qingming might perform the fire style ninjutsu, and thus predicted it in advance. And this move will undoubtedly buy him a lot of time. However, just when he just smiled, his eyes suddenly widened, and the smile on his face became stiff. There was no other reason. Qingming did perform the fire style ninjutsu, but it was not the fire style, dragon fire technique he imagined, but the fire style, great dragon fire technique. Compared with the fire style, dragon fire technique, the biggest difference is that the flames can be divided into 3 fire dragons, attacking the enemy from 3 different directions. Kenomura's water style, water array wall is just a general ninjutsu, which has not been improved. It is not like the second generation Hokage, Tobirama Senju, which can form a circular encirclement. The water wall he erected can only resist attacks from the front. Qingming, on the other hand, divided his mind into 3 parts, controlling 3 fire dragons, attacking Kenomura from the left, middle and right directions at the same time. There is no doubt that the front fire dragon was blocked by the water wall, but the other 2 fire dragons bypassed the water wall and rushed to Kenomura from both sides. Although Kenomura reacted in time and avoided the frontal impact of the fire dragon, he was still injured by the flames produced by the explosion of the fire dragon. Looking at the embarrassed Kenomura, Qingming nodded with satisfaction. This was the first time he practiced a fire style, great dragon fire technique after copying it from Uchiha Qingming. It must be said that it is still very useful under certain conditions. However, because it was the first time to practice, his proficiency was not enough. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Kenomura to be the first to perform the same level of ninjutsu, water style, water array wall. But the result can only be said that the opponent was not very lucky. Chapter 461 Harassment. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. Qingming gathered his mind, drew out the long sword from his waist, and then a green light flashed on his body, and he performed the instant sword technique again. Before Kenomura could stand firmly, he saw Qingming's figure appear in front of him. The next moment, a bright knife light shot over and directly reflected into his eyes, making his consciousness dazed. Not good. In an instant, Kenomura realized that something was wrong, and immediately rolled over, trying to avoid Qingming's attack. However, Qingming had already predicted his movements, and almost at the moment he ducked, he threw several shurikens. Puchy puchy, the sound of flesh being pierced rang out. Although Kenomura discovered the shurikens at the last moment and struggled, the injuries on his arms and body slowed down his movements. In the end, 2 shurikens hit his body, causing him to freeze. The next moment, Qingming's long sword swept past and directly chopped off the opponent's head. As the head flew away, a large amount of blood spurted out from his neck, like a fountain, instantly dyeing the surrounding sea red. However, facing such a horrific scene, Qingming did not even blink. No, to be more precise, his attention had been diverted from here. At this time, the 2 shadow clones responsible for blocking the support of Kirigakure had collapsed under the siege of more than a dozen Kirigakure ninjas. The 3 shadow clones that attacked the surrounding Kirigakure ninjas together with Qingming, except for one that was defeated by Kenomura, the remaining 2 also disappeared in the melee just now. This is not because they are weak, but because these 2 shadow clones took too many risks in order to kill the enemy as quickly as possible. And if you walk by the river often, you will get your shoes wet. In the end, they still died at the hands of the Kirigakure ninjas. However, with such desperate efforts, their results were also remarkable. Look, the nearby Kirigakure Chunin have almost been cleared out. As for the Kirigakure Junin, after Qingming killed Akabane Yasuke and Omura Ken in succession, there was only one left, and he was just a special Jonin who was good at perception. When he saw Qingming's eyes sweeping towards him, he immediately got rid of the opponent in front of him without any hesitation, and ran towards the Kurigakure Jonin who came to support him. Qingming did not choose to stop him, firstly because it was too late, and secondly because it was unnecessary. He looked up at the dozen Kurigakure Jonin who came to support him. Through the chakra in their bodies and the aura on their bodies, Qingming could roughly infer that there were at least 5 Jonin-level fighters among them. There is no doubt that this was difficult for the surviving friendly forces nearby to fight against. But despite this, Qingming still said, "I'll leave them to you." After saying that, regardless of the astonished eyes of several Konoha ninjas, he immediately raised his hand to form a seal, performed the wind style, wind wings, flew high into the sky, and flew towards the direction of the Kurigakure warships. Several Konoha ninjas looked in the direction of his flight, and could see that the Kurigakure warship still did not stop and continued to move forward. They then understood that it was not that Qingming was ruthless, but that he had a more important mission. After thinking this through, several people felt relieved. Although they still had hope for life at this time, they also knew that the biggest role of themselves now was probably to act as bait and cannon fodder. Several people looked at each other, and immediately dispersed, and then stood in place, quietly waiting for the arrival of the Mist Ninja support troops. However, the Mist Ninjas who were rushing saw the direction where Qingming left, but they separated 1/3 of their people and returned to the direction of the warship. This made the surviving Konoha ninjas happy. There is no other reason. Fewer people means a greater chance of survival. Although this chance is not much, it is better than before, isn't it? Qingming also saw the returning Mist Ninja, but he didn't care much. He flapped his wings hard, and his speed suddenly increased to the limit. At a speed of 40 meters per second, he flew towards the direction of the Mist Ninja warship, at the same time. On the other side, in the center of the Kurigakure fleet, on the deck of a Kurigakure warship, Osaoyuki looked at Qingming who was flying straight towards them. His face was extremely ugly. The reason why he just ignored the sacrifice of Kenomura and others and kept ordering the fleet to move forward was that he wanted to get to the Blackstone stronghold as soon as possible. He had received the message from Akaku Yasudai and knew that this was a rare opportunity. But now, looking at Qingming's appearance, he was determined not to let them leave easily. This made Osaoyuki very angry. But no matter how angry he was, he didn't dare to let the fleet continue to move forward under Qingming's nose. He could ignore the harassing Konoha teams in front, because these people had limited means and could not break through the traditional defense mode. But Qingming was different. Flying was his biggest advantage. In this case, ordinary means could not limit him. Therefore, Osaoyuki must be fully alert to deal with it. In this case, naturally, he could not move forward. With this thought in mind, Osaoyuki said to a female Mist Ninja beside him, "Mizuki, pass the order and ask the team to stop moving immediately." "Yes, Captain," Sakurai Mizuki responded, then took out a flute from the ninja bag and blew it. Immediately, a gentle sound came out of the flute, and then with chakra as the medium, it quickly spread to the surroundings and entered the ears of those Mist Ninjas and Qingming. This sound sounded ordinary to Qingming, but to the ears of those Mist Ninjas who knew the secret code, it was Osaoyuki's order. Immediately, all the Mist Ninja warships began to slow down and approach each other faintly. Seeing this scene, Qingming's mouth curled up slightly, and he was going to take advantage of the opportunity before the Mist Ninja warships completely stopped to harass them first. However, just when he had just lowered his altitude and was about to take action, a harsh flute sound suddenly entered his ears. At this moment, Qingming felt dizzy and almost fell from the sky. Fortunately, Qingming's mental strength was strong, and the moment he realized the problem, he dispelled the flute sound. Then, he climbed up again. At the same time, he also dodged the kunai and shuriken thrown by the Mist Ninja below. Not far away, Sakurai Mizuki saw this scene, and a hint of disappointment appeared in her beautiful eyebrows. However, Osaoyuki next to him was not much surprised. Indeed, Sakurai Mizuki has good talent and has mastered several soundwave ninjutsu and illusions, but they have sent similar ninjas to deal with Qingming. For example, when they raided Eaglesby Cliff and the Anbu ninjas set up the 4 Mist Seal formation, they sent the senior ninja, Mizuguchi Hideo, to try to rely on the sound wave illusion he mastered to sneak attack Qingming. But what was the result? Qingming is still alive and kicking. And Sakurai Mizuki's ability is not necessarily stronger than Mizuguchi Hideo. Therefore, Osayuki was not surprised that Qingming broke free from the influence of the illusion so quickly. However, it does not mean that Sakuragi Mizuki is useless. On the contrary, she played a big role. With her around, Qingming at least didn't dare to be too arrogant. Chapter 462 Destruction and Delay. In fact, it was true. After being tricked like this, Qingming did not dare to lower his altitude and approach the Kurigakure fleet at will. However, this did not mean that he gave up. Glancing at the female ninja standing next to Osayuki in the center of the fleet, Qingming flapped his wings and immediately flew to the end of the fleet. Because Osayuki's order had just been issued, these Kurigakure warships had not completely stopped, so they were not too close to each other. Therefore, when Qingming appeared here, he was not close to the female ninja. At this time, even if the other party used the sound wave illusion just now, he could easily resist it. Without any hesitation, Qingming immediately dived and approached the last Kurigakure warship. However, before he could make a move, dense wind bombs were immediately shot at him. Qingming looked closely and saw that 3 Kurigakure ninjas had appeared on the deck below. Judging from their breath and chakra, 2 of them were special Jonins and the other was a real Jonin. The one who had just used the wind escape technique to attack him was the real Jonin. Qingming flapped his wings in the air to avoid the incoming wind bombs. At this moment, the other 2 special Jonins also attacked. One of them used a water escape technique against Qingming, and a stream of water sprayed out of his mouth, hitting Qingming's heart. The other threw several shurikens to block Qingming's space to dodge. If it were just that, it would be fine. The key is that the other mist ninjas responded to the 3 people's attack and attacked Qingming. If it were before, facing such an attack, Qingming could only temporarily avoid the edge. It is true that after the physique attribute was increased to 19 points, his body's defense and self-healing ability have been greatly improved. In this way, coupled with the level 8 palm fairy technique, his ability to withstand injuries is far beyond the reach of ordinary fragile ninjas. But he is still immortal after all, and cannot withstand so many attacks. But now it's different. Qingming's eyes flashed, locked onto the incoming attack, flapped his wings to dodge, raised his hand to seal, and in the blink of an eye, he performed the ninjutsu, earth-style, hardening technique. The next moment, his skin suddenly turned into a rock-like gray-black color, and his defense ability increased significantly. At this time, Qingming no longer avoided those kunai and shuriken that were purely physical attacks. These attacks hit him, and except for making him feel a little pain, they could not break his defense at all. In this way, Qingming's pressure was naturally greatly reduced. On the contrary, the mist ninja below was caught off guard by his move. Taking this opportunity, Qingming approached the mist hidden ship. The next moment, the fire-style, Great Dragon Fire technique was performed, and 3 giant fire dragons appeared, split into 3 directions, and pounced on the mist hidden ship. One of the fire dragons pounced on the deck and attacked the mist ninjas, and the other 2 hit the ship itself. Even though the mist ninja reacted quickly, not only dodging the attack of the fire dragon that pounced on the deck, but also performing the ninjutsu, water-style, water dragon bullet technique, condensing a giant water dragon to offset a fire dragon that pounced on the ship. But in the end, a fire dragon still crashed into the warship. In an instant, a big hole was blasted out of the ship, and the raging flames spread all around, engulfing a large area. Seeing this scene, the mist ninjas jumped off the ship to avoid it. Qingming flew around the warship for half a circle. Then, finding the right opportunity, he performed the ninjutsu again in succession, fire-style, Great Dragon Fire technique and fire-style, Great Fireball technique. 3 fire dragons and a fireball appeared one after another, all falling on the mist ninja warship. As a result, the fire on the ship below became more fierce. Admittedly, this move did not kill many mist ninjas, but it really destroyed a mist ninja warship. And this is enough. Raise the altitude again and fly high again. Qingming looked at the burning ship below and the mist ninjas standing in a panic on the sea around him, and he was very satisfied. It was not until this moment that his skin returned to its former white appearance. The first actual use of the earth-style hardening technique had an extraordinary effect. It must be said that the protection of the fleet by the mist-hidden ninjas was quite in place. This can be seen from the sudden appearance of the 3 mist-hidden ninjas and the fact that the harassment team sent by Shinobu Hisa was almost completely killed and wounded, and did not cause much damage to the fleet. Unfortunately, they encountered Qingming, an unreasonable master, who actually withstood their attacks and destroyed their ships. In this regard, Qingming could only say that they were unlucky. If he had not suddenly become interested and come over, they might have been able to get to the outskirts of the Blackstone stronghold first and take the lead in launching an attack. Unfortunately, there is no if in this world. Since he came, it is naturally impossible for such a thing to happen. With a change of mind, Qingming did not linger any longer and flew at full speed. In just a few breaths, he arrived at the other end of the fleet, which was the location of the first mist hidden ship. Originally, he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to catch the other party off guard. Unexpectedly, the other party seemed to have guessed his idea. Not only did the 3 Jonins who were already on that warship show up, but 2 Jonins were also transferred from the 2 mist hidden ships in the back for support. In other words, there are now 5 Jonins concentrated on a single mist hidden ship. Although most of them are special Jonins with only one skill, their strength is not weak. In addition, his Earth-style hardening technique has just been exposed, and it is highly likely that he will not be able to surprise the other party. In this case, if he continues to approach, it will be a bit dangerous. As for the warship in the middle of the bow and stern, Qingming glanced at it. It can be seen that the mist-hidden ships on it are very alert, and some of them have even left the warship in advance and are guarding around the ship, waiting for him to approach. In addition, the senior ninjas on various warships were also staring at him, ready to support him at any time. This made Qingming dare not act rashly for a while. However, Kirigakure did not dare to take the initiative to provoke. The situation was frozen. Qingming hovered in the sky, constantly passing through the skies of the Kirigakure warships, watching them approach each other little by little, knowing that he could not wait any longer. Once they were gathered together and could support each other at close range, more manpower would be freed up. At that time, it would be difficult for him to take action again. With this in mind, Qingming suddenly lowered his altitude. Seeing his actions, the Kirigakure ninjas below immediately became alert. Especially the Kirigakure ninjas on the ship directly below him and the Kirigakure ninjas scattered around him were extremely nervous, and their hearts were almost in their throats. However, to their surprise, Qingming did not launch an attack directly. After lowering to the limit they could reach, he stopped descending. Then, a large amount of white mist poured out from him, spreading rapidly in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped an area of dozens of meters. And this was just the beginning. As time went on, such white mist continued to spread outward. During this period, some mist ninjas also took action, using various means, such as wind escape or fire escape, to try to disperse the white mist, but they never succeeded. At most, they slowed down the spread of the white mist, but were eventually swallowed up by the white mist. After a dozen breaths, looking down from the sky, you can see that the entire mist-hidden fleet has disappeared. At this time, a huge white mist ball covered the sea, like cotton candy, covering an area of nearly 200 meters. This mist is not ordinary mist, but a mist containing a lot of chakra, which was transformed by Qingming's water escape, mist-hidden technique. And the reason why Qingming did this was not to cover up the whereabouts of the mist-hidden fleet, but to prevent them from getting close to each other. As we all know, when sailing on the sea, in addition to the need to pay attention to reefs at all times, foggy environments are also very dangerous. At this time, the fleet will get lost if they are not careful, and there is also the risk of collision with each other. Indeed, the ability of ninjas is stronger than that of ordinary people, and these things will not happen easily. But don't forget that the white fog created by Qingming is not ordinary fog. The chakra contained in it is enough to affect the perception of ninjas. Moreover, what Qingming wants is not to destroy them all, but to delay enough time. In this way, it is enough to maintain the existence of the white fog, and then launch some attacks appropriately to put pressure on the opponent. And then, the development of things is just as Qingming expected. Chapter 463, Scoring a Second Score. In the white fog, Daisy-Yushu stood on the deck, looking at the whiteness around him. He let go of his perception, and after confirming that his perception was greatly affected, he no longer hesitated and immediately issued an order for all ships to approach cautiously. After a few breaths, when the order was conveyed and Daisy-Yushu was thinking about how to break the situation, a loud boom came from behind. Is this a detonating talisman? Daisy-Yushu was shocked and knew that Qingming had probably taken action. This made him feel very difficult. In the past, they were the ones who used the water-style, mist-hidden technique to restrict the enemy's performance. This time it was their turn to become the passive party, and they knew what it meant to be tied up. Wait, suddenly, Daisy-Yushu thought, Since they couldn't break the enemy's blockade, why not add fuel to the fire? In an instant, his mind opened up. Ignoring the increasingly fierce fighting sounds behind him, Azayuki directly called out to Sakurai Mitsuki beside him and said, "Mitsuki, notify the captains of each ship immediately and ask them to organize their personnel to perform the mist hidden technique. Perform the mist hidden technique." Upon hearing this order, Sakurai Mitsuki was confused at first, but soon she understood Azayuki's intention. So, she immediately nodded and said, "Yes, Captain." After responding, she immediately performed the secret art of sound transmission without any hesitation, and conveyed Azayuki's order to the captains of all ships. However, after performing this art, her face was obviously a little pale. Obviously, under the interference of Qingming's huge chakra, it was also a very difficult thing for her to accurately convey the order. Fortunately, it can still be done. And shortly after Azayuki's order was issued, Qingming, who was attacking a mist-hidden warship at the rear of the fleet, suddenly froze. Dodging several kunai, Qingming flapped his wings and suddenly rose to a higher altitude, out of the attack range of the mist ninja. Then, he floated in the air, closed his eyes, and used the chakra scattered in the white mist to sense the slightest movement inside. After a moment, he opened his eyes and muttered, "Sure enough, there is a different kind of chakra, that's right." Just now, he suddenly felt a strange chakra spreading around, which not only interfered with his perception, but also made the white mist around him thicker. After his careful sensing, he could confirm that someone was also performing the water-style, mist-hidden technique. Moreover, it was not just one person. During the time he sensed, 3 more people also performed this technique. And this was just the beginning. Now, the white mist around has become thicker at a speed visible to the naked eye. The reaction is really fast, worthy of being the master of the mist-hidden technique. Looking at all this, Qingming couldn't help but sigh. Now, he has guessed the plans of these mist ninjas. It was nothing more than using the characteristics of the water-style, mist-hidden technique to dilute his shares in the white mist, so that he could not launch attacks at will. Not only that, because of the living environment of the mist-hidden ninja itself and its familiarity with this technique, it might be possible to take the opportunity to counterattack. However, it would take more than a short time to achieve this. Before that, he might be able to destroy another mist-hidden warship. Thinking of this, Qingming turned his gaze back to the bottom. His sight seemed to pass through the white mist and saw the still slightly panicked crowd on the ship. Just now, he launched a sneak attack on this mist-hidden warship. Now, he seemed to be able to kill it back and forth. Qingming did it as soon as he thought of it. Without any hesitation, he immediately raised his hand to seal and performed the ninjutsu, wind style, great breakthrough. Hundreds of chakras were consumed, and a hurricane of moderate size came out of his mouth, just blowing away the white mist in an area below. Below, on a mist-hidden warship, a group of mist ninjas were still surprised that Qingming had suddenly left, but the white mist in front of them was blown away. Immediately, many people showed joy on their faces. They thought that their own Jonin had broken Qingming's ninjutsu blockade. Azayuki's order had just been conveyed to the leading Jonin on each warship, and those mid-level ninjas were not aware of his plan. Therefore, it was normal to have such an idea. But it was also because of this that Qingming seized the opportunity. He flapped his wings and approached the mist-hidden warship at a very fast speed. On it, the 2 mist-hidden warships saw this and their expressions suddenly changed. While launching an attack, they shouted loudly, "Everyone, attack immediately!" Unfortunately, Qingming's speed was too fast, and the mid-level ninjas on the ship could not react at all. As for the attack of the 2 Jonins, Qingming directly performed the earth-style, hardening technique to resist the kunai thrown by one of them, and then flapped the wings behind him to avoid the fire-style ninjutsu released by the other one. At this time, he was not far from the ship. Without any hesitation, Qingming immediately raised his hand to form a seal, and at a very fast speed, he performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wind blade. Swoosh! A giant wind blade about 10 meters long appeared and cut straight into the Kurigakure warship. The 2 Kurigakure Jonin wanted to stop it, but the wind blade was flying too fast, and with the angle that Qingming deliberately looked for, they had no time to cast a spell. So, they could only watch the warship being penetrated by the wind blade. Crack! With the sound of the wooden board breaking, a large gap suddenly appeared below the waterline of the Kurigakure warship. The next moment, a large amount of seawater poured in from here. It was about to flood the cabin, and some of the Kurigakure ninjas shouted loudly, "Quick, quick, block the gap. However, they wanted to block it, but Qingming didn't give them a chance. Almost at the moment when the wind blade penetrated the ship, he formed a seal again and cast a ninjutsu, fire style, great dragon fire technique. Puff a flame spurted out of his mouth and instantly turned into 3 fire dragons. Then, under his control, one rushed towards the Kurigakure ninjas who were preparing to block the gap in the ship, and 2 rushed towards the Kurigakure warship. Seeing this, the 2 mist ninja jonins immediately took action and stopped the 2 fire dragons that were rushing towards the ship, but they were powerless to stop the last fire dragon. In the end, the mist ninjas had to temporarily give up blocking the gap in the ship and work together to stop the fire dragon from approaching. Indeed, their strength was not as good as the 2 jonins, but with their combined strength, they still defeated the fire dragon. But this also allowed more seawater to enter the cabin, causing the entire mist ninja warship to tilt a little. Taking this opportunity, Qingming went around to the other side of the ship and performed the fire style, great dragon fire technique again. This time only 1 fire dragon was blocked, and the other 2 fire dragons crashed into the mist ninja warship, turning the entire warship into a sea of fire. As a last resort, the 2 mist ninja jonins could only order everyone to abandon the ship. At this time, only a few breaths of time had passed, and the white mist that had just been blown away by Qingming gathered again. This made Qingming unable to continue to attack. However, he didn't need to attack again. The mist-hidden ship had been hit by a wind blade and 2 fire dragons, and there was no chance of survival. So there was no need to take risks. He didn't even need to attack the other mist-hidden ships. Destroying 2 ships was enough to slow down their progress. Next, he just needed to maintain the water style, mist-hidden technique and ensure that they couldn't get out for a while. Chapter 464 Leaving an Unexpected Surprise. Poof! A mist-hidden ship rushed out of the white mist like passing through cotton candy. Then the second and third ships. Finally, all the mist-hidden ships were out of the coverage of the water style, mist-hidden technique. At this time, nearly half an hour had passed since Qingming cast the spell. In the sky, Qingming gently flapped his wings, suspended in the air, looking at the mist ninjas below, and finally lifted the water style, mist-hidden technique. At this moment, his face was extremely pale, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. There was only one reason for this, that is, he consumed too much chakra. In the past half hour, he has been trying his best to maintain the water style, mist-hidden technique. And what about the mist ninjas? They were also casting this technique, competing with him for control of the white mist. In this way, with one person's strength, he was against several mist-hidden ninjas and several mist-hidden ninjas. Even if his chakra amount was far more than that of ordinary people, he was still somewhat incapable. If that were the case, it would be fine. The key is that he needs to adjust the area covered by the white fog from time to time to ensure that the mist ninjas cannot leave. That's right. Over the past period of time, the mist ninjas have not only weakened his control over the white fog, but also manipulated the ships under the command of Azoyuki to try to sail out of the white fog. This forced Qingming to follow suit. In this case, the difficulty can be imagined. Only because of Qingming's amazing chakra can he persist for such a long time. If it were someone else, I'm afraid he would have been drained long ago. However, he is almost there now. Although his chakra is recovering rapidly, it is still a long way from its peak state. In this state, he naturally can't stop the mist ninjas from moving forward. However, Qingming glanced at the slightly crowded mist ninja warships and said to himself, sure enough, destroying the 2 mist ninja warships first is the right choice. This time, in order to take down the Blackstone stronghold as much as possible, the mist ninjas have sent out their best troops. Let's not talk about Yasuda Akaku for now. Here, almost every warship is packed with people. Now, 2 of the ships were suddenly destroyed by Qingming, and the remaining ships naturally became more crowded. In this way, the speed of the mist ninjas will inevitably be affected. In addition, the time Qingming delayed in the past half an hour was enough for Nobuhisa and others to return to the Blackstone stronghold first. Therefore, he did not need to stop the mist ninja from moving forward. Qingming finally glanced at the sea in the distance. The Konoha ninjas who had survived because of his arrival had all died at this time. Obviously, the hope that Qingming brought to them was just flowers in the mirror and the moon in the water. Only when you are strong yourself can you be truly strong. Everything else is just false. With a murmur, Qingming retracted his gaze, shook his head, and stopped thinking about it. He flapped his wings and flew towards the direction of the Blackstone stronghold. Below, the mist ninjas looked at Qingming, who was going away with complicated expressions. "Captain, do we still want to continue?" Sakurai Mizuki asked softly beside Osayuki. "Since Qingming has left, it means that his goal has probably been achieved. And anyone with a discerning eye can see what his goal is, which is nothing more than delaying time. In other words, Konoha is probably ready. Now, even if they continue to move forward, it is probably impossible to capture the Blackstone stronghold as expected while it is empty. And if they force an attack, based on the battle 2 days ago, if Konoha is focused on defense, it will be difficult for them to succeed. Not to mention, the other friendly forces also encountered an ambush and suffered heavy losses, and could not provide much help at all. In this case, it is almost impossible for them to complete the mission objectives. Is there really a need to move forward? This is not only the voice of Sakurai Mizuki, but also the idea of many other mist ninjas. However, when she asked, she got a firm answer. Then as Oyuki said, "Continue." "Of course we must continue." He looked at Sakurai Mizuki and said, "You must immediately send a message to the Jonins of each team, and have them organize their manpower and start moving at full speed." Sakurai Mizuki was stunned when she heard this and wanted to say something, but when she saw Oyuki's serious face, she immediately swallowed back what she wanted to say. Unlike Konoha, Kirigakure is more particular about the relationship between superiors and subordinates because of the iron-blooded rule of the third Mizukage. Therefore, once as Oyuki makes up his mind, the teams below, even the Jonin leaders, must obey completely. Therefore, Sakurai Mizuki did not dare to disobey him at all, and immediately began to cast a spell to convey Oyuki's order to the Jonin leaders of each fleet. Soon, the entire Kirigakure fleet began to move. Standing on the deck of a ship in the middle, looking at the warships in front and behind, Oyuki was absent-minded. There were 3 reasons why he gave the order to continue moving forward. One of them was that he was unwilling to give up this opportunity, and he still had some hope in his heart. Hopefully, Konoha's actions will not be so fast, so that they can seize this opportunity. Secondly, Yasuda Akaku is now rushing towards the direction of the Blackstone stronghold. If they choose to retreat at this time, then what awaits these people must be a siege. By then, it will be up to luck to decide how many people can survive. Osayuki is unwilling to bear such a loss. The third reason is the village's order. Others may not know, but Osayuki knows that the village's actions near the gap in Konoha's southern defense line are not going very smoothly. Although a lot of territory has been expanded in the past 2 days, Konoha's resistance is also very fierce. In addition, there is intelligence that Konoha seems to have some plan and is preparing to target them. Therefore, the village does not want any loopholes in other places at this time, and wants them to ensure that there will be no Konoha ninjas to support that side. It is for this reason that the teams responsible for the feint attack cannot shrink back even if they cannot capture the target stronghold. This is also the reason why he immediately launched the attack after only 2 days. Originally, after hearing that the team led by Yasuda Akaku was ambushed, he wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to break through Konoha's Blackstone stronghold and make a great contribution. As a result, things have developed to this point. Now, he can only take one step at a time. With a sigh, Osayuki whispered to himself, "What a pity," at the same time. On the other side, after Qingming flew out for several kilometers, he was about to continue flying forward, when suddenly his body shook, and a feeling emerged in his heart. What is this? Qingming was stunned at first, then he was happy, and quickly lowered the altitude and landed on the sea. Standing on the sea with his feet, Qingming closed his eyes and began to carefully recall the feeling that just emerged in his mind. After a moment, he opened his eyes. Panel. With a thought, Qingming opened the proficiency panel. On it, the level of wind style, wind wings was quietly raised from LV4 to LV5. It turned out that during his flight just now, the wind style, wind wings had accumulated enough proficiency and broke into the level 5. And the insights that emerged in his mind were also some of the key points of the level 5 wind style, wind wings. With a thought, Qingming raised his hand to form a seal, and in an instant, he performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wind wings. Swish, a pair of light blue chakra wings appeared. Qingming glanced back and saw that the appearance of this pair of chakra wings did not change much compared to the level 4. However, the inside Qingming's mind moved slightly, and the wings behind him flapped lightly, and then the whole person flew high into the sky. Then, there was a dazzling flying action. It can be seen that his movements are obviously much more flexible than those at level 4, and various sharp angle turns can be said to be easy to catch. In addition, the flying speed level 5 is a transformation for any ninjutsu, and wind style, Wind Wings is no exception. After being promoted to level 5, his flying speed has more than doubled. The speed directly increased from the fastest 40 meters per second to 100 meters per second. Although it is still 2/3 of the way to supersonic speed, it is indeed not slow. 100 meters per second is equivalent to 360 kilometers per hour. This is much faster than a car. Now, in the entire ninja world, it is estimated that only Namake's Minato's Flying Thunder God technique and the Heavenly Sending technique of the Hidden Cloud Village can suppress him. As for the others, such as Luoshi's Magnetic Style, Gold Sand, Anoki's Super Light and Heavy Rock technique, the Peacock Secret technique of the Hidden Star Village, the Foam technique of the Hidden Mist Village 6-Tail, the Wings of the Hidden Taki Village 7-Tail, etc., these are impossible to catch up with him. And this is only his level 5. When his wind style, Wind Wings, is upgraded by 1 or 2 levels, the speed will undoubtedly become faster. By then, it will be even more difficult to catch up. And he will also gain more freedom. Sure enough, I still have to work hard, Qingming muttered finally, flapped his wings again, and flew towards the direction of the Blackstone stronghold. Chapter 465 Return. Because of the significant increase in speed, Qingming originally estimated that it would take 20 minutes to get back in less than 10 minutes. Outside the Blackstone stronghold. On a position. Morimu Titsuchi looked at Qingming, who had returned safely, and immediately went to meet him. In the sky. Qingming also saw him. However, he did not go down, but performed the heart-to-heart technique on the spot and roughly told him what happened on the sea. He told him that the Kurigakure army would most likely not be able to arrive before Nobuhisa Sano returned. However, he did not let the other party relax his vigilance. Because he did not know whether Osayuki would take the risk, abandon the large army, send a small force, and cross the sea to raid the Blackstone stronghold at the cost of chakra. Although this possibility is not great, the most taboo thing when two armies fight is negligence. Therefore, even if there is the slightest possibility, he must remind him. After receiving Qingming's reminder, Morimu Titsuchi immediately assured, "Don't worry, we won't be careless." Yeah, Qingming nodded and said nothing more. After cutting off the connection of the heart-to-heart technique, he flew to the south of the base where Yasuda Akaku and others were coming. Looking at Qingming's departing back, Moriki Titsuchi did not waste time and immediately went down to prepare to deal with a possible small group of Kurigakure troops, at the same time. South of the Blackstone base. Yasuda Akaku and others, who were still some distance away from the Blackstone base, finally received the information from Osayuki. Looking at the information in his hand, Yasuda Akaku's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Originally, he thought the situation was bad enough, but he never thought that the situation was even worse than he expected. Damn Uchiha Qingming, Yasuda Akaku squeezed the information in his hand into a ball and said with gritted teeth. According to the information from Captain Osawa, because of Uchiha Qingming's obstruction, they could no longer reach the Blackstone base first. So, next, there is no need to consider the joint attack. Yuki Azawa ordered him to adjust the direction of advance immediately, avoid a Blackstone stronghold first, and then attack it together after meeting up with him. This made Akaku Yasuda very unwilling. Although he had basically given up the idea of raiding the Blackstone stronghold, he was still expecting a miracle to happen. Otherwise, he would not have marched straight towards the Blackstone stronghold. But now, Yuki Azawa clearly told him that a miracle could not happen. This made his spirit fall to the bottom. After a long time, Akaku Yasuda finally recovered. He looked at Yukio Yokoyama next to him, and said in a slightly tired tone, "Yukio, notify each team to prepare to adjust the direction of advance." With a lesson from the last time, Yukio Yokoyama did not say any nonsense this time. After hearing Akaku Yasuda's order, he immediately went down to prepare. So, soon, the direction of Kurigaku's march changed slightly. Although it was still approaching the direction of the Blackstone stronghold, it was finally deviated. If this continues, they will eventually miss the Blackstone stronghold and appear directly to its east, near the sea. Behind. Aoyamanaka and the others looked at the Kurigakure team that suddenly changed direction, feeling somewhat puzzled. But they finally followed. At this time, they were already more than 2 teams, and the rapid support force sent by Nobuhisa Sano had already joined them. Therefore, they were not worried about the Kurigakure ninjas' conspiracy. Time passed by minute by minute. About 5 minutes later, Qingming appeared above the Kurigakure team. Huh? Looking at the direction they were heading, Qingming exclaimed lightly, seeming to be a little puzzled as to why they chose this direction. But after a little thought, he understood the plans of these people, and also guessed a cause and effect. Shaking his head, Qingming did not pay much attention. After circling above them for a few times, Qingming did not stay, and continued to move backwards, and soon found the location of Yamanaka and the others. From them, Qingming knew the whereabouts of the large force led by Nobuhisa Sano. As he expected, at their current speed, although they could not reach the Blackstone stronghold before Akaku Yasuda and the others, they would definitely be able to return before Yukio Sao and the others arrived. That's enough. Below. After Yamanaka finished talking about the latest news, he immediately asked Qingming about the situation in the base and whether another team of enemies had arrived. Qingming did not hide these two questions. He spoke quickly and spent a little time to give a general account of the situation in the base. By the way, he also told them about his recent interception of Osao Yuki and others, which was considered to reassure them. Sure enough, when he told the other party that the other team of mist ninjas would most likely not be able to reach the Blackstone base before them because of his surprise attack, everyone immediately breathed a sigh of relief. After that, the two sides communicated for a while, and Qingming left this place and flew to the direction of the large force led by Sano Nobuhisa. He had done so many things, so he naturally had to report to Sano Nobuhisa, the highest commander of the base. Not to mention the issue of credit, intelligence communication alone was very necessary. Otherwise, if the other party made some stupid decisions due to the lack of intelligence, he might have to clean up the mess in the end, and Qingming didn't want to waste this time. Therefore, it is better to avoid this problem from the beginning. In addition, he also needed a relatively safe place to restore his own chakra. And nearby, is there any place safer than staying in the large army? Thanks to the accurate intelligence and the flying speed of the level 5 wind-style, wind wings, Qingming quickly found the traces of the large army. Needless to say, after Qingming reported the relevant intelligence to Sano Nobuhisa, he used the excuse of insufficient chakra in his body to mix in with the large army and act with them, in a flash. Half an hour passed quietly. Qingming and others finally returned to the Blackstone stronghold. What he worried about before, that Osao Yuki would send a small force to raid, did not happen. The situation in the stronghold was the same as when he left more than half an hour ago. And now, with the addition of the large army, Mori Mutitsuchi and others had less pressure to defend. As for Yasuda Akaku and others, according to the news from Yamanaka and others, these people were now in the east of the Blackstone stronghold, close to the coastline, and seemed to be waiting for Osao Yuki and others to arrive. After learning the news, Sano Nobuhisa thought about whether to take the opportunity to surround and kill these people, or drive them away completely. But in the end, after some deep thinking and familiarity, he gave up. There was no other reason. First there was a big battle, and then there was a non-stop journey. Most of the Konoha ninjas were already very tired. In this situation, it would be too risky to attack rashly. Moreover, according to the latest intelligence, the fleet led by Osao Yuki is about to arrive, and they do not have enough time to surround and kill these mist ninjas. In this case, it is better to leave this time for everyone to recover some strength and prepare for the subsequent battle. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466 The Destined Ending. An hour later. The sun had already set in the sky, and the afterglow of the sunset sprinkled on the sea, reflecting a large area of golden color. In the golden color, a large ship slowly appeared. Looking carefully, 4 marks that looked like water and fog were clearly visible on it. It was the ship of the Hidden Mist Village. That's right, this Hidden Mist warship was one of the fleet led by Osao Yuki. After it, several similar ships slowly appeared. They arrived a little later than expected, and it was obvious that they had rested in the middle. In other words, they could launch an attack immediately. And the other party did just that. Because Yasuda Akaku and others occupied the coastline, Sano Nobuhisa did not send people too far forward this time. Among them, The first line of defense was less than 1 kilometer away from the stronghold. In this way, it naturally could not cause any impact on Izayuki and others who arrived. Therefore, they came to the land smoothly, and after meeting with the Yasuda Akaku and others, they launched an attack without staying for too long. The battle broke out instantly. This time, neither side played any tricks, just face-to-face attack and defense, competing for overall combat effectiveness. Blackstone Stronghold. South City. The top of a building. Qingming stood here and looked to the east. Although it was a little far away, with the inside of the Sharingan, he could still roughly see the situation on the battlefield. After watching for a few minutes, Qingming nodded. Overall, this time, because of a series of previous actions, although the number of people in the stronghold was a little less than 2 days ago, the situation was better than that time. There was no other reason. The status of the ninjas on both sides was not at the same level. Konoha had just won a victory, and with a pre-war rest, not to mention morale, at least they could play to the level they should. And what about the mist ninja? Admittedly, Izayuki and Yasuda Akaku blocked the news and compressed the time for the two groups to contact, but no one was a fool. Although they didn't have much time to communicate, they could still see what the other side was like. Therefore, even if Izayuki and Yasuda Akaku didn't say it, they could guess that the plan would not go smoothly. Most ninjas are actually ordinary people. When they are worried, their strength will inevitably be affected. 1 or 2 may not be a big deal, but when more than half of the team is in this state, the combat power that can be exerted will inevitably drop a level. In this way, how can they win? Qingming can almost foresee that this battle will end with a defeat of Kirigakure. Unless the opponent has a shadow-level strongman like Namoka's Minato who can fight 10 or even 100 people to join the battle. Otherwise, it is impossible to change the situation. So, does the opponent have such a person? Perhaps the reserve of the 3rd Mizukage and the 4th Mizukage, Yagura, has this ability, but they can't participate in the battle here. From here, it can be seen that the overall strength of the Kirigakure village, which is isolated overseas, is actually very average. Now it is taking advantage of Konoha's fight with several parties to fight in the Land of Fire. Otherwise, with their strength, it would be hard for them to cross the forward base established by Konoha in the southeast of Wave Country. At least, before the decisive battle between Konoha and Sand Village, their main force did not cross there, right? Shaking his head secretly, Qingming no longer thought about it, raised his hand to seal, and performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wind wings. Swish, a pair of light blue chakra wings appeared. Qingming controlled it to flap lightly, and then the whole person left the roof, then adjusted the direction, and flew towards the battlefield at a very fast speed. Indeed, the outcome of this battle is doomed. However, if he did not take action, Konoha would still have to pay a heavy price to repel the opponent. And if he had the spare strength, he didn't mind helping them. And in the air, Qingming felt the chakra in his body. After an hour of recovery, he now has less than 30,000 chakra points in his body. Although this amount of chakra is already beyond the reach of many ninjas, it is not a small amount even among the senior ninjas. However, in Qingming's opinion, it was still a little unsafe. So, he planned to take advantage of this melee to replenish his chakra. Thinking of this, Qingming accelerated again, and a few seconds later, he arrived above the battlefield. Without giving those Kirigakure Jonin time to prepare, Qingming aimed at a Kirigakure Chunin and landed. You ask why he looked for a Chunin? It's very simple. Jonin has little chakra, mental energy and physical energy, so it's not worth wasting his time. And Jonin is not so easy to subdue. So, after all the calculations, it is still the most cost-effective to set the target as a Chunin. And the Kirigakure Chunin below seemed to have never thought that a master like Qingming would actually look for him. Therefore, when Qingming appeared, the other party was still confused. But Qingming didn't care what the other party was like. Almost at the moment when the two looked at each other, he performed the Genjutsu, Sharingan. In an instant, the consciousness of the Kirigakure Chunin was pulled into the illusion. Qingming didn't waste time, he flashed forward, completed the seal on the way, and then grabbed the other party's neck. The next moment, the chakra absorption technique was activated, and a large amount of chakra flowed out of the body of the Kirigakure Chunin like a flood. Then, through the chakra meridians in his palm, it was transformed into his own chakra. In a breath, the opponent's chakra was sucked dry by him. Even so, Qingming was not satisfied, he continued to maintain the chakra absorption technique. Then, the spiritual energy and physical energy in the opponent's body were forcibly extracted by him, then transformed, and finally turned into chakra and absorbed by him. After a few seconds, Qingming loosened his palm. At this time, the Kurigakure Chunin had been drained by him and completely lost his life. Qingming roughly felt it and found that the chakra in his body had increased by more than 10,000 points, and then nodded with satisfaction. At this time, two sounds of breaking through the air suddenly came. Qingming's ears moved slightly, and then his body leaned slightly. The next moment, two kunai flew past his eyes and stuck in the ground not far away. Qingming looked in the direction where the two kunai came from, and saw two Kurigakure looking towards him. Obviously, they were the ones who launched the sneak attack just now. Qingming narrowed his eyes slightly. The next moment, he used the flash body technique. X22 short screams rang out. Qingming appeared in front of the two Kurigakure at some point, and then knocked them down with one punch and one kick. Puff X2 blood spurted out of the two people's mouths. This shows how powerful Qingming's punches and kicks are. Ignoring the miserable appearance of the two people, Qingming used the Genjutsu Sharingan to control them directly. Then, he immediately formed a seal and performed the chakra absorption technique. Almost in the blink of an eye, he grabbed the two people in his hands and began to extract the chakra in their bodies. After the chakra was exhausted, it was the mental energy and physical energy. He didn't release his palm until they were completely drained. Although his target was the Chunin, since the two people attacked him, he would not be polite. Chapter 467, Training. Well, another 10,000 chakra points, not bad. Qingming released his hand, sensed the chakra in his body, and nodded with satisfaction. At this time, two bangs were heard, and the bodies of the two Kurigakure in front of him fell heavily to the ground, completely dead. Qingming ignored the two, and his eyes swept across and stared at another Kurigakure Chunin. At this time, this person was fighting with a Konoha Chunin. Kanglang Qingming drew out the long sword from his waist, seized the opportunity, and a green light appeared on his body, and the instant sword technique was immediately performed. The next moment, he appeared beside the Kurigakure Chunin. Without any pause, the moment his body stopped, he swung the long sword in his hand. However, it seemed that because he had killed 3 people in a row before, the Kurigakure Chunin had some psychological preparation. So, at the moment he swung the sword, he lowered his body and actually dodged it. Not only that, he also rolled over and pulled the distance between him and him. The opponent performed this set of moves very smoothly. But seeing this, Qingming just shook his head and said, "It's useless." As he spoke, he stepped forward and swung the longsword in his hand again. This time, his speed was faster. Because the mist-hidden ninja was afraid of his Sharingan illusion, he didn't look at him, so he couldn't see the angle of his attack at the first time. The two unfavorable factors overlapped, and when he confirmed that the attack was coming, it was too late to dodge. As a last resort, he could only resist. At the critical moment, he raised the kunai in his hand and blocked it in front of him. Ding! A crisp metal collision sound rang out. Qingming slashed the opponent's kunai with a knife, and the huge force made him retreat half a step. And this retreat completely lost the initiative. The next moment, Qingming put away the knife and dodged, and the whole person appeared at his side again like a ghost. Whoosh! The longsword in his hand was swung out with a biting wind. Yoko Ono felt the killing intent and quickly retreated. The long knife missed, but Qingming did not stop and dodged again, coming to the other side of her body and swinging the long knife again. A huge sense of crisis came over Yoko Ono, and she wanted to continue dodging, but she had no chance and was forced to block. However, every time Qingming's knife fell, it carried a huge force, and the angle of the knife was tricky, so he couldn't use his full strength at all. With one side gaining strength and the other losing strength, he had no choice but to retreat step by step. Ding ding ding! The dense metal collision sounded like raindrops. Qingming surrounded Yoko Ono and continued to attack. Finally, after a few breaths, Yoko Ono couldn't keep up with his rhythm. When he swung the knife again, she didn't react in time and was cut off half of her arm by him. A painful sound came from Yoko Ono's mouth. Qingming turned a deaf ear to it. He just took advantage of the moment when the other party's body was stiff due to pain, and with an instant sword technique, he came in front of him and used the magic, jail hanging technique on him. In an instant, Ono Yoko couldn't move, and felt as if her whole body was nailed by several huge iron nails, and the pain was unbearable. Qingming ignored the other party's painful expression, raised his hand to make a seal. and performed the chakra absorption technique. When Qingming pressed his hand on her chest, Onoyoko felt a huge suction force coming, making the chakra in his body disappear quickly like running water. At this point, Onoyoko could still maintain the most basic calmness. However, when the chakra in his body was drained, and this force began to drain his physical energy and spiritual energy, he finally panicked, and his eyes were full of fear. What is physical energy and spiritual energy? This is the foundation of human beings, representing the human body and spirit. If the energy of these two is drained, can the person still live? The answer is obvious. No. At the last moment of her life, Onoyoko roared unwillingly, and even broke free from the restraints of the magic shackle technique. However, it was useless. When Qingming retracted his palm, he still lost his breath. Bang! Onoyoko's body fell heavily to the ground. Qingming didn't even look at it, and immediately found another Kurigakure-Chunin. And this Kurigakure-Chunin reacted even faster, and responded almost immediately. However, in the face of absolute strength, some tricks are useless. It only took a dozen breaths of effort for Qingming to find an opportunity and control the opponent, and then it was the familiar chakra absorption technique. After a few seconds, Qingming drained the opponent's chakra, as well as mental energy and physical energy. At this point, his chakra finally recovered to more than 80,000 points. However, it is not easy to improve it again. There is no other reason. Not far away, two Kurigakure-Junin have already rushed towards him. Obviously, Kurigakure has freed up their hands and is ready to send someone to deal with him. Qingming was not surprised by this. He knew very well that a famous ninja like him would be targeted by enemy ninjas once he appeared on the battlefield. That was why he attacked so quickly and decisively, fearing that he would be interrupted. Now, his chakra had been replenished, so he didn't have to worry about their targeting. He even looked forward to fighting with these mist ninjas. The reason was simple. His proficiency in instant sword technique had improved a bit after the battle in the valley. Now, his proficiency had reached level 6, 8,450 10,000, and he was about to be promoted to level 7. In this case, having a few sparring partners would save him a lot of trouble. Therefore, Qingming was not worried about the targeting of mist ninjas. Thinking of this, Qingming didn't waste any more time, and drew out a long sword from his waist. Then, with a flash of green light on his body, he performed instant sword technique and approached the two people not far away. On the other side, seeing Qingming coming straight towards them, the two mist-hidden ninjas looked at each other and did not choose to dodge, but just slightly pulled away, and then formed a horn and rushed towards Qingming. The moment before approaching, they threw the kunai in their hands, attacking Qingming's throat and heart. Sensing the danger, the three Magatama in Qingming's pupils rotated rapidly, quickly locked onto the two kunai, then dodged one, and then swung the knife and chopped off the other. However, the two mist-hidden ninjas were waiting for this opportunity. They saw that the two took advantage of the moment when Qingming blocked the kunai and attacked Qingming's head and neck at the same time, punching and kicking. Qingming reacted quickly, and immediately ducked forward to avoid the attacks of the two. The two mist-hidden ninjas were relentless, and immediately took out a kunai from the ninja tool bag, and attacked Qingming with slashes or stabs. Qingming did not hesitate at all. He immediately leaned back to avoid the kunai, and then blocked the stabbing kunai with a long sword in his hand. Ding! The kunai stabbed the blade of the long sword, making a crisp sound. Seeing this, the Kurigakure-Junin wanted to use force to force Qingming back. However, Qingming stood on the ground with both feet, and his chakra was tightly attached to the ground, and he did not move at all. Not only that, he also took the opportunity to deflect the blade, leaving the Kurigakure-Junin with empty hands, and his body moved forward by inertia and leaned towards him. Seeing this, Qingming's eyes condensed, and he immediately reversed the handle of the sword, and the long sword in his hand slashed from bottom to top at the Kurigakure-Junin in front of him, as if to split him in half. Chapter 468 Tacit Understanding. Feeling the murderous intent from Qingming, and looking at the long sword coming straight at him, Murakami-Yu's heart was in turmoil. The next moment, he touched the ground with his toes and suddenly stopped his forward movement. Then, with his right foot as the center, he rotated 90 degrees, and while retreating, he avoided the attacking long sword. Whoosh! Qingming's long sword missed. He focused his eyes, adjusted his body slightly, and then turned his wrist, and the long sword changed from a vertical chop to a horizontal chop, and chopped directly at Murakami-Yu's waist. Murakami-Yu reacted quickly, jumped up, and avoided the attack just in time. Seeing this, Qingming was about to attack again. However, at this moment, another mist-hidden ninja suddenly attacked, swung the kunai in his hand, and slashed at his neck again. Sensing the danger, Qingming could only give up chasing Murakami Yu for the time being, and instead used the longsword in his hand to block the incoming kunai. Ding! The kunai and the longsword collided, making a crisp metal collision sound. Then, a harsh friction sound was heard. The two men tried to force the other to retreat and take the initiative. Unfortunately, no one succeeded. The kunai and the blade rubbed against each other, making a sizzling sound, and sparks burst out in the meantime, which was very beautiful. Just when the two were in a stalemate, Murakami Yu finally adjusted his body shape, found an opportunity, and stabbed the kunai in his hand, aiming directly at Qingming's heart. A strong sense of crisis came over Qingming, and he immediately withdrew his strength without any hesitation. However, his retreat avoided Murakami Yu's attack, but also lost some of the initiative. The mist-hidden ninja who had just wrestled with him noticed the opportunity and attacked immediately without any pause. Qingming had no choice but to swing his sword to block. Ding ding dang dang. For a time, the two fought into a wall, and the sound of metal clashing continued. If it was just like this, it would be fine. With his current swordsmanship level, even if he lost the initiative, he could regain the initiative after dozens or even dozens of moves. But the bad thing is that there is a Murakami Yu outside as an assistant. Once the mist-hidden ninja in front of him shows a weakness or flaw, the opponent will immediately come forward to make up for it. And these two people are all fully developed real Jonins, and their strength is far beyond the special Jonins who only have one skill. Although it was only a short fight, Qingming could probably see that the strength of these two people may not reach the level of elite Jonins, but it is also better than ordinary Jonins. In this way, under the joint efforts, without using the main Gekyo Sharingan, he really can't take the opponent for a while. However, Qingming is not very anxious. In addition to the battle, he glanced at the battlefield around him. It can be seen that although the Konoha side is on the passive defense, it will launch a counterattack from time to time. And being able to launch a counterattack while defending is enough to explain the problem. Obviously, the pressure on Konoha is not that great. In this way, he doesn't need to rush to do things. The two people in front of him can just be used to hone his swordsmanship, so as to further improve his proficiency in instant swordsmanship. With this thought, Qingming stopped thinking and began to concentrate on dealing with the two. On the Kurigakure side, there seemed to be a tacit understanding. Seeing that the three of them were fighting fiercely, they stopped sending people over. Of course, it is also possible that Kurigakure could not spare any extra manpower, so they could only let them fight here. But no matter which situation it was, it gave the three people room to play freely. So, the two Kurigakure senior ninjas used all their means, and took turns to use various physical techniques, ninjutsu and illusion techniques they mastered, trying to kill Qingming. However, facing these attacks, Qingming behaved quite calmly. During the battle, unless necessary, he only used swordsmanship to fight the enemy, especially the instant sword technique, which clearly showed that he was using the two people as a whetstone. But even so, the two Kurigakure senior ninjas could not do anything to him. Earlier, Qingming said that if the two people joined forces, he would find it difficult to defeat the opponent in a short time if he did not use the trump card of the main Gekyo Sharingan. This was the situation where he took the initiative to attack. If he switched to defense, the situation would be quite different. It would be a pipe dream for the other party to get an advantage from him. That is why Qingming acted so calmly. Time passed by minute. In the blink of an eye, nearly half an hour had passed. The battle between Qingming and the two mist-hidden ninjas was still going on. Half an hour is long, but short. For a battle between Jonins, half an hour is nothing, but for most mid-level and low-level ninjas, the consumption is a bit high. This is true for both chakra and physical strength. And a decrease in physical strength means a low state. In this case, mistakes are most likely to occur. And mistakes mean flaws. The battle between ninjas is largely about ensuring that you do not reveal your own flaws, and then looking for the enemy's flaws to attack. From this, it is not difficult to imagine that in the next period of time, the casualties on both sides will inevitably increase greatly. Perhaps it will not reach the stage of white hot, but it will be almost the same. However, Qingming just glanced at these and stopped paying attention. As long as Konoha does not collapse, there will be no big problem. As for life or death, It depends on one's own luck. Now, he just wants to improve the proficiency of instant sword technique as soon as possible. In the past half an hour, with two Jonins as sparring partners, his proficiency of instant sword technique has directly increased by nearly 500 points. This makes his instant sword technique closer to the perfect state of LV7. Such an opportunity, he can't miss it. And his naked posture of looking for a sparring partner naturally attracted the attention of Murakami and another mist-hidden ninja. After a battle, the two of them roughly guessed his plan and knew that he might be using them as a whetstone. However, they had no other way except to cooperate. In the past half an hour, they had thought about killing Qingming, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't do anything to Qingming. In this case, what can they do? Call for support? Sorry, Azayuki has clearly told them that there are no extra people to assign to them. As for leaving, that is even more impossible. Not to mention that the superiors have orders. They must entangle Qingming. Even if there is no order, they can't leave at will. They're here, and Qingming is just using them as a whetstone. Once they choose to leave, who knows if he will attack other mist ninjas? Even if he doesn't attack other mist ninjas, if Qingming gets serious and deals with them with all his strength, it will be a huge trouble. In this case, it is better to just muddle through. Perhaps in Konoha and Iwagakure, which attach great importance to ideological education, or in a warlike village like Kumagakure, ninjas will still shed their blood for the village, but in the Mist Village, which is known as the Blood Mist Village, most ninjas do not have such an idea. Moreover, even in Konoha and the other two villages, most of the ninjas who have such an idea are young ninjas who have just graduated from school. As long as they experience the dark side of the village a little bit, unless they are idealists, most ninjas will no longer have such naive ideas. Therefore, Murakami and another mist ninja, after confirming that they could not kill Qingming and could not ignore the orders of their superiors and leave, tacitly chose to act as Qingming's whetstone. Only in this way can they save their lives to the greatest extent. As for the battlefield situation, to be honest, they felt that they had done a great job by being able to hold Qingming here and prevent him from participating in the battles between other Jonin. What else could they be asked to do? Moreover, what they were doing now was exactly what Izayuki expected when he assigned them the task. Therefore, the two of them did not feel guilty about slacking off. Qingming also saw the changes in the two, but he did not pay much attention to it. All he needed was a whetstone. If the other party cooperated, it would be fine. If not, they were not the only two on the field. Now, the cooperation of the other two saved him a lot of effort. In this way, the three of them fought with a strange tacit understanding. During this period, Qingming's proficiency in instant sword technique continued to grow at a steady rate, and gradually approached the perfect state of LV7. Chapter 469 Perfection. In autumn and winter, the sky always gets dark early. It's not even 7 o'clock yet, but night has already fallen. At this time, more than 2 hours have passed since the battle. On the battlefield, the battle between the ninjas of both sides has already entered a white-hot stage. Both Konoha and Kurigakure suffered heavy casualties. Despite this, without the orders of the commanders of both sides, the ninjas on both sides still cannot retreat and have to continue fighting. Fortunately, as the battle progresses, the battlefield of both sides is no longer limited to the small area from the east of the Blackstone stronghold to the sea. A long time ago, the footprints of the ninjas on both sides were spread over an area of several kilometers. And this made many ninjas breathe a sigh of relief. Why do you say that? It's very simple. When the personnel are dispersed, they don't have to kill an enemy ninja and then immediately face another enemy. On this relatively wide battlefield, they can set traps and ambushes to save some physical strength. However, all this has nothing to do with Murakami and another Kurigakure senior ninja, because Qingming doesn't give them this opportunity at all. It is true that Qingming has understood what they meant, and is happy to see them cooperate with him to improve his proficiency. However, this does not mean that he will let them go. On the contrary, he has been maintaining a high-intensity battle. Because only in this way can he gain the most proficiency. Improving proficiency is not just a pretense, it must be truly practiced according to the skill requirements, otherwise the speed will be amazingly slow. It is precisely because of this that he has hardly taken the initiative to leave the two of them a little rest time in the past 2 hours. It is only because the other party is 2 people that they can gain some rest time through occasional round-robin battles, otherwise they would have been unable to hold on. Of course, Round-robin battles cannot be carried out frequently, because none of them has the ability to fight Qingming alone. Most of the time, they are two people together to deal with Qingming's attacks. Because of this, they are now very tired. In sharp contrast to them is Qingming. Indeed, Qingming is younger and not yet an adult. Logically speaking, his body is not fully developed and his physical strength should be worse. However, more than 2 hours have passed, and he is fighting 1 against 2, but he does not show any fatigue. This puzzled Murakami Yu and another missed hidden ninja. They knew that the Uchiha clan's Sharingan could enhance mental strength, but they had never heard that it could strengthen the body. In this regard, Qingming could only say that the 19-point physique was not for show. According to his observations and comparisons over the past 2 years, the adult ninjas in the ninja world, excluding those with excellent bloodlines, whether they were Jinan, Chunin, or Jonin, the physical attributes converted into the values on the panel fluctuated around 10 points. His 19-point physical fitness seemed to be only less than twice that of the other party, and it seemed that there was not much difference, but in fact it was not. Because the growth of physical fitness attributes is not linear, but exponential, the further back, the greater the improvement of physical fitness with 1 point of attribute. Qingming roughly estimated that his comprehensive physical fitness was at least 5 to 7 times that of ordinary adult ninjas. In this case, his endurance was naturally not comparable to that of ordinary ninjas, even if these ninjas had chakra as a backup. What's more, he was not without chakra. Even more, his chakra is more than that of ordinary ninjas. The accumulation of various advantages has led to the current situation. Looking at the 2 missed hidden ninjas in front of him, whose breathing was obviously much heavier, Qingming had no mercy. He did not stop, and a green light suddenly flashed on his body. He once again performed the instant sword technique, approached the opponent, and launched an attack. Ding ding dang gang. For a time, the dense sound of metal clashing rang out again. Feeling his increasingly perfect instant sword technique, Qingming's mind converged and immersed himself in the pleasure of brushing proficiency again. However, he was comfortable here, but Murakami Yu and another missed hidden ninja were under great pressure. Not to mention the decline in combat power caused by severe physical exhaustion, the instant sword technique that Qingming focused on practicing alone caused them great pressure. At first, they could keep up with Qingming's speed and occasionally change people to rest. But now, unless the 2 of them concentrate and check each other for omissions, it is easy to react in time. This puts them under great pressure. If it were just that, it would be fine, but the key is the mental pressure. For some reason, they always felt that Qingming would improve a little bit every time they fought. This feeling of watching the enemy improve little by little and then crush themselves is simply not something that ordinary people can bear. Therefore, as the fight progressed, they revealed more and more flaws, and gradually, the 2 began to be unable to make up for it. Swish! The sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh and blood rang out. Qingming used a flash sword technique and appeared beside Murakami Yu, and then swung a mediocre knife. He had no time to block or dodge, and the other missed hidden ninja did not react, causing Qingming to slash Murakami Yu's right forearm with a knife. If it were not for the critical moment, when he leaned back and slightly relieved a little force, Qingming's knife would be enough to cut the opponent's bones. However, even so, the injury on the opponent's arm was not light. Although Qingming did not infuse wind escape chakra in this knife, the sharpness of the Kusanagi sword itself was enough to tear the opponent's flesh and blood. Tick tick tick, drops of blood fell. At this moment, both Qingming and the 2 missed hidden ninjas were stunned. This was not because Qingming had finally hurt the other party. Although the 2 had cooperated well for more than 2 hours, Qingming still left some scars on them. The reason why he was stunned was that this was the first time he had hurt the other party so easily. And this seemed to be a sign that the 2 people on the opposite side could no longer put any pressure on him in this state. Concentrating his thoughts, Qingming no longer thought about it, stepped forward, closed the distance with the other party, and swung the longsword in his hand again. However, this time Murakami Yu reacted quickly, immediately jumped back, pulled the distance, and dodged the sword. At the same time, another missed hidden ninja also hurried forward and attacked Qingming, trying to distract his energy. However, Qingming ignored the other party at all, and before he got close to him, he once again performed the instant sword technique, and approached Murakami Yu, who was flying backwards at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Murakami Yu saw him coming and hurriedly stopped his steps and was about to swing the kunai attack. However, at this moment, Qingming suddenly paused, and then a bright green light shone on his body, and he actually performed the instant sword technique for the second time. With a swish, Qingming's figure disappeared, and when he appeared again, he had already come to the right side of Murakami-yu. The next moment, he swung a knife. This scene was like a scene reappeared. Chapter 470 Beheading. Murakami-yu was horrified when he saw the long sword of Qingming coming from the right. He immediately changed the direction of the kunai in his hand and planned to block Qingming's attack. However, Qingming had left a wound on his right arm, which affected the flexibility of his right arm. In addition, Qingming's sword came too suddenly and too quickly. Therefore, Murakami-yu did not block it at all. Swish, the sound of the sharp blade cutting through flesh and blood sounded. Ah! Murakami-yu let out a short scream. The longsword in Qingming's hand, wrapped in the extremely compressed wind escape chakra, slashed across the opponent's right arm. The next moment, half of his arm was broken. A large amount of blood gushed out and spilled on the ground, staining a large area red. Murakami-yu endured the pain and jumped back several times in succession, trying to distance himself from Qingming. However, Qingming was unforgiving. Almost at the moment he retreated, he once again used the instant sword technique and approached the opponent at a very fast speed. However, this time, he was attacked as soon as he appeared. The attacker was none other than another mist ninja. Everything happened too fast just now, and the mist ninja had no time to react. Now, he finally got the chance, so he naturally wouldn't hold back. Swish, 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 several shuriken shot straight at him. Qingming sensed the danger, and his mind changed. He temporarily gave up the idea of finishing off the opponent, and dodged the shuriken attack with a flash of his body. However, he dodged, but the mist ninja was relentless and threw several kunai again, shooting at him rapidly. Qingming turned his head slightly and looked around. The inside of the Sharingan was fully activated, and in just a moment, he discovered a trick. It turned out that among the kunai, there was a kunai with an explosive talisman wrapped around the handle, which could not be found without careful observation. It can be predicted that if he dodges it as an ordinary kunai, he will definitely be seriously injured. Fortunately, Qingming never relaxed his vigilance from the beginning to the end. Therefore, he found the clues at the first time. The three magatama in his pupils rotated rapidly, and Qingming locked the flight trajectory of the kunai in an instant. The next moment, he took out a kunai from his ninja tool bag and threw it out without thinking. The two kunai flew towards each other, and with a ding sound, they collided in midair, and sparks splashed out. Then, they flew in different directions. Boom! A violent explosion sounded. However, it did not affect Qingming at all. In addition, the remaining kunai were also easily dodged by Qingming. After that, he did not pause at all, and immediately performed the instant sword technique and chased after Murakami-yu, who was moving away. At this time, the other party was treating the injury on his right arm while running towards the coastline, obviously intending to leave. Unfortunately, even with the restraint of another mist hidden ninja, Qingming still easily caught up with him. Immediately, the battle started again. Soon, another Kurigakure Jonin joined in. However, the battle did not last long, and Qingming defeated the two. There was no way, losing an arm would have too much impact on ordinary ninjas. And without Murakami-yu, a powerful helper, relying on another Kurigakure Jonin, he was no match for him. In just a few minutes, Qingming found an opportunity and slashed the Kurigakure Jonin with a knife, leaving him with a deep wound that could be seen to the bone. So far, both Kurigakure Jonins were seriously injured by him. The two of them were panting heavily. Looking at Qingming, who was walking towards them step by step, they looked at each other, and then shouted in unison, "Run!" The next moment, two bangs were heard. Two smoke bombs were thrown on the ground by them. In an instant, the dark purple smoke with a pungent smell spread out, instantly covering an area of more than 10 meters in radius. Qingming was in the middle of it, and felt uncomfortable all over. His perception was also suppressed, and he could not accurately determine the position of the two mist-hidden ninjas. Obviously, this kind of smoke bomb can not only cover the site, but also release smoke, which can affect people's perception. Realizing this, Qingming did not hesitate at all. He immediately raised his hand to seal, opened his mouth, and performed the ninjutsu, wind style, great breakthrough. A gust of wind blew out of his mouth, sweeping the area dozens of meters in an instant. The smoke that was shrouded in the surroundings was blown into pieces in just a blink of an eye. Qingming looked around and immediately saw the traces of Murakami-yu and another mist-hidden ninja. However, There were as many as 7 or 8 of them. Among them, half were Murakami-yu, and the other half were another mist hidden ninja. Obviously, the two of them performed the shadow clone technique in an attempt to disrupt his sight. Wait, Qingming suddenly realized that Murakami-yu had just lost an arm. If he had not practiced it specifically, it would be impossible to perform the shadow clone technique with only the remaining hand. In other words, these shadow clones were created by another Kurigakure Jonin, but some of them turned into the appearance of Murakami-yu. Tisk, they really have a deep relationship. In this situation, he didn't forget to help his teammates. What a pity, Qingming muttered. Without any hesitation, he immediately raised his hands, crossed them into the character seal, and also performed the shadow clone technique. The next moment, the same number of shadow clones as those Kurigakure ninjas appeared in the field. Without Qingming's instructions, they chased after Murakami-yu and the shadow clones of another Kurigakure Jonin. At the same time, Qingming formed a seal again and performed the ninjutsu, the mind communication technique, connecting all the shadow clones. In this way, no matter which shadow clone discovered the other's true identity, he and the other shadow clones would know it at the first time and make the correct response. It turns out that using the shadow clone technique to escape is not so safe, especially when encountering a master who is not short of chakra. When Qingming split out the same number of shadow clones to conduct one-on-one defense, the result was doomed. Neither Murakami-yu nor another Kurigakure Jonin escaped the pursuit of his shadow clones. Soon, their true identities were exposed. After that, things were very simple. Qingming first let one of the shadow clones entangle Murakami-yu, whose strength was greatly damaged, and then he personally went out and killed another Kurigakure Jonin at the fastest speed. Then, he returned again and killed Murakami-yu. At this point, the two people who had been entangled with him for a long time were all killed by him. And until this time, Qingming had the mind to carefully review the insights brought by the promotion of the instant sword technique to perfection. That's right, his instant sword technique had already been promoted, just when he cut off Murakami-yu's right arm, but he didn't have time to comprehend it at that time. Now, he can finally experience it carefully. Chapter 471 Retreat. Qingming glanced around and confirmed that there was no one around for the time being, then immersed his mind in the perception of new knowledge. It must be said that the perfection of the instant sword technique has brought him a huge change. Let's not talk about anything else, just talk about the interval between two instant sword techniques. Before the promotion to LV7, no matter how fast his movements were, there would be a pause in the middle. And now? It is not necessary at all. In other words, the pause time can be ignored. It is for this reason that he was able to catch Murakami-yu off guard before, and rushed from the front to the side in just a moment, thus cutting off his arm. Otherwise, even if his right arm was injured, he would not be able to easily catch the opportunity. And in the subsequent battle, the reason why he was able to quickly solve another mist hidden ninja was also due to the promotion to the LV7 perfection of the instant sword technique. Qingming can almost foresee that his name of Ghost Sword will undoubtedly be more worthy of the name in the future. Time passed by minute. After a long while, Qingming finally opened his eyes. Afterwards, he did not linger, found a direction, and ran out. He now urgently wanted to test the latest instant sword technique and absorb some more chakra. Although he had mostly used swordsmanship to fight the enemy in the past 2 hours, frequent use of instant sword technique also consumed a lot of chakra. In order not to affect the subsequent improvement of other skills, he could only search for some more chakra. In addition, this battle has lasted long enough, it's time to end it. Thinking of this in his heart, Qingming ran a little faster, ding south of the Blackstone stronghold. In an open space, Uchiha Shisu waved the kunai in his hand and blocked the incoming attack. Looking at his opponent, he was a young mist-hidden ninja. He had long black hair and white skin, but his gender was a little hard to tell. If he was a man, he looked a little soft, and if he was a woman, he had some male characteristics. In short, he was a little neutral. Looking at the attack he launched, it was actually a thin needle formed by ice crystals. There is no doubt that this is the ability of Ice Escape. Combined with his identity as a mist ninja, it is not difficult to guess that he is most likely a ninja from the Snow Clan of the Hidden Mist Village. In this case, it is normal for him to look a bit neutral. The ninjas of the Snow Clan are affected by their genes. It is okay for older ninjas, but they are basically like this for younger ones. If they have awakened their bloodline limits, the impact will be even greater. Just like the mist ninja in front of us, At first glance, most people can't tell whether he is a man or a woman. Among them is Qingming. Swish! Qingming's figure appeared silently, and when he saw the mist ninja in front of him, he was obviously stunned for a moment. However, when he saw the ice needles condensed by him, he didn't think much about it and immediately launched an attack. Swish! He threw several kunai, predicting the actions of the mist ninja and shooting at his vitals. Zhu Wuho sensed the danger, and his peripheral vision swept to Qingming. He immediately gave up the idea of continuing to attack Uchiha Shisu, and dodged the kunai thrown by Qingming. Because the two sides had never fought before, Qingming didn't know Zhu Wuho's habits very well, so his prediction was not so accurate. In addition, the distance between the two sides was still far, giving Zhu Wuho more time to react. Therefore, he easily dodged the attack. However, there was no joy on Zhu Wuho's face. It was troublesome to deal with Uchiha Shisu alone, and now with Uchiha Qingming, he was really unsure. Just when he was thinking about whether to avoid the enemy's edge first, Qingming threw several kunai again. However, this time, the kunai he threw were mixed with two detonating talismans. At first, Zhu Wuho didn't find anything unusual, but when the kunai got closer and closer, a strong sense of crisis filled his heart. He didn't hesitate and immediately dodged to the side. And this was the opportunity Qingming was waiting for. Suddenly, a green light appeared on his body. The next moment, he appeared beside Zhu Wuho with his sword. What? Zhu Wuho seemed to have not expected Qingming to appear so suddenly, and screamed. However, his reaction was also very fast. He almost instinctively urged the power of his blood limit, released chakra with his hand, and condensed an ice shield in front of him. Qingming slashed at the ice shield with a knife, and the blade embedded in the ice, making a chi-chi-chi sound. A large number of ice crystal fragments fell, and Qingming's long sword pulled a deep dent on the ice shield, and finally got stuck in the ice shield, failing to cause any harm to Zhu Wuho behind him. Not only that, Zhu Wuho also took this opportunity to open his mouth and spurred out a large ball of cold air, attacking Qingming's face. Feeling the biting cold coming from the front, Qingming frowned slightly. Then, with a thought, a large amount of fire escape chakra was injected into the long sword, instantly melting the ice that gradually spread to the blade. Feeling the long sword loose, Qingming pulled hard and retracted the long sword, then jumped back to avoid the erosion of the cold air. The fight between the two was lightning fast. It was not until this time that Uchiha Shisu realized that Qingming had come here. With a flash body technique, Uchiha Shisu appeared beside Qingming. He looked at Zhu Wuho and said, "Qingming, how is your side?" Qingming also stared at Zhu Wuho and said without turning his head, "It's been solved." Hearing Qingming's words, Uchiha Shisu didn't say anything, but just nodded, as if he had expected it. But Zhu Wuho in front was not calm. It was because he knew Azuyuki's arrangement and knew that Qingming was handed over to two fellow Jonins. Now, Qingming said that the battle over there was over, which meant that the two were dead. These were not special Jonin, but two real Jonin. Without these two people, the impact on their high-end combat power would be huge. As soon as he thought of this, Zhu Wuho's face became even uglier. Just when he was distracted, Qingming and Uchiha Shisu moved. Among them, Qingming directly used the instant sword technique, flashed to his side, and swung the long sword in his hand. Uchiha Shisu threw the kunai in his hand to restrain Zhu Wuho's energy. Zhu Wuho was caught off guard. Although he reacted in time and avoided the life and death crisis, he was inevitably embarrassed. Qingming seized the opportunity and continued to attack him. He used the instant sword technique promoted to level 7,001 one after another. The whole person was really like a ghost. Only his shadow could be seen, but not his person. In this situation, Zhu Wuho had no chance to counterattack except passive defense. In this way, coupled with Uchiha Shisu's occasional sneak attacks, he fell into an absolute disadvantage in a short while. Just when he was anxious, a huge firework appeared in the sky. The moment he saw the fireworks, Zhu Wuho's expression was shocked. Qingming and Uchiha Shisu didn't know what this meant, but he knew very well that this was a signal to retreat. In other words, he could leave. Chapter 472 Harvest. Seeing that Qingming and Uchiha Shisu's attention were attracted by the huge firework, Zhu Wuho did not hesitate and immediately burst out all his chakra, and the whole person's speed increased, rushing towards the coastline. Huh? Seeing his reaction, Qingming immediately understood the meaning of the firework, but he had no intention of chasing. There was no other reason. His original goal was to test the effect of the instant sword technique that had been promoted to the perfect state, and to harvest some chakra by the way. Meeting the opponent was just a coincidence. Now, his first goal has been achieved. Although the process of fighting just now was short, Zhu Wuhu's strength was strong enough for him to get the result. Therefore, there was no need to hold on to the opponent. Now, completing the second goal is the top priority. It happened that the Kurigakure side had already sent out a signal to retreat. As long as he was ready to intercept, there would be no worries about not being able to harvest chakra. With this thought, Qingming did not hesitate at all, immediately raised his hand to seal, and performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wind wings, and flew into the sky. Before leaving, he said to Uchiha Shisu, I'll leave him to you. I'll go take a look at other places. After that, without waiting for Uchiha Shisu to answer, he flapped his wings and disappeared from the spot. Looking at his back as he left in a chick manner, Uchiha Shisu showed a hint of envy in his eyes. However, this envy was quickly thrown behind his mind. Now, he still has important things to do and has no time to think about it. Uchiha Shisu looked in the direction where Zhu Wuhu left, and jumped up to catch up. It is true that the other party intends to evacuate, which will no longer affect the subsequent battle situation, but if possible, Uchiha Shisu still wants to keep the other party. Because only in this way, the next time they fight, fewer people will die on their side, on the other side. Without caring about a possible battle between the two, Qingming flew high into the sky and immediately activated the 3 Magatama Sharingan with all his strength, using the weak light around him to observe the actions of the mist ninja below. It can be seen that as the firework rose, the ninjas of the Kurigakure on the battlefield became obviously a little anxious. One by one, they were trying to get out of the battle, and then either alone or in a team, they all ran towards the sea. This also verified Qingming's guess again. Kurigakure was going to withdraw. After confirming this, Qingming gathered his mind and began to carefully select the target to attack. The battlefield below is big and small. During the battle, the area of several kilometers in radius, no matter how they move, they can't leave this range for a while. However, when escaping, with a ninja's footwork, with full burst, only a few minutes are enough for them to escape from this battlefield. This time is very short. In addition, these Kurigakure ninjas are fleeing in a scattered manner. Therefore, he only has 1 or 2 opportunities to attack. In this case, if you want to get as much chakra as possible, you must find the right target to attack. First of all, the team of the Jonin must not be intercepted. Even the weakest Jonin, if he tries his best, can have some impact on him, and it is a complete waste of time to attack them. Secondly, unless the Jonin gather in large numbers, there is no need to attack them. Because they have too little chakra, it is not worth the loss to attack them. Moreover, more than 2 hours have passed, and there are not many Jonin who survived, and it is unlikely that they will gather in large numbers. Therefore, they can be directly excluded. Finally, there are the lone Chunin. These Chunin either have some special abilities or are really unlucky. The former will affect his efficiency. The latter can only provide him with a small amount of chakra. No matter which one it is not what he wants to see. Therefore, they can also be abandoned. In this way, the most suitable for him to attack are undoubtedly those teams composed of a small number of Chunin. Only by attacking them can the cost effectiveness be the highest. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind, and Qingming immediately looked for suitable targets according to the final criteria. Under the night, Qingming was like a ghost, flying silently above the heads of the crowd, carefully looking for the corresponding targets. The Scarlet Sharingan stared at the bottom, and Qingming quickly locked a team. This is a team of 3 Chunin. They were running in the forest, and Qingming found their tracks. Without any hesitation, Qingming swooped down and approached them from behind. Below, Iwasaki Masakazu was running with 2 companions. Suddenly, a shadow enveloped him. Instinctively, he looked up. Then, he saw a pair of blood-red eyes. What is this? Iwasaki Masakazu's heart trembled, as if he had thought of something, and he wanted to shout out immediately. However, before he could make a sound, his consciousness was pulled into the illusion. Then, the whole person stopped running and fell to the ground. Masakazu, seeing this, the other 2 Chunin of the mist stopped and looked back. However, before they could see what happened to Iwasaki Masakazu, another figure appeared in their field of vision. Who else could it be but Qingming? The 2 people's reaction was also very fast, and they immediately recognized Qingming's identity. Suddenly, The two secretly said that it was not good, and they were about to abandon Iwasaki Masakazu and run away. However, they turned back after all. At the moment when the three of them looked at each other, Qingming once again used the Genjutsu, Sharingan, to control one of them. As for the other one, Qingming released the wind style, wind wings, and landed on the ground. The next moment, he drew the long sword from his waist, and then used the instant sword technique and flash behind him. Swish! The long sword was swung out. Qingming was about to chop the opponent's neck. The mist-hidden ninja sensed the danger and immediately jumped forward to avoid the attack, then rolled over and head to the side. At this time, he had also adjusted his position and faced Qingming. Since I can't escape, I can only fight to the death, Harada Yuang thought so in his heart. However, when he looked up to find Qingming's figure, he saw nothing. Where did he go? Harada Yuang was puzzled and looked around nervously. At this moment, a sound of air being torn suddenly came from the side. In the corner of his eye, a cold light flashed. Harada Yuang secretly said that it was not good, and immediately wanted to dodge sideways. However, it was too late. With a swish, Qingming's long sword slashed across his left arm. The next moment, his arm fell to the ground. Not only that, a deep wound appeared on his waist, and the bone was visible. A large amount of blood gushed out, and the Kurigakure Chunin wailed and fell to the ground, and it seemed that he was about to die. Qingming's face did not change at all, and immediately a magic, jail hanging technique was performed to control the opponent and make him unable to move. So far, the three Kurigakure Chunins were all subdued by him. Excluding the time for searching, the whole process took less than a few seconds. Of course, this was due to a sneak attack, but it is undeniable that the role of instant sword technique should not be underestimated. Just like dealing with the last Kurigakure Chunin, if it were in the past, he might have to spend a little more effort, but now he can easily kill him. It can be said that the perfection of instant sword technique has once again raised the lower limit of his close combat ability. It may not be obvious when dealing with Jonin, but it is extremely obvious when dealing with these mid and low-level ninjas. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473. After the war. Concentrating his mind, Qingming didn't waste time. He immediately raised his hand to seal and perform the chakra absorption technique to extract the chakra of the mist ninja in front of him. At this time, Harada Yuang had lost a lot of blood, and his breath became weak and unstable. If he continued to delay, he would probably die. At that time, it would be impossible to extract chakra. Qingming would naturally not be so wasteful. However, although his movements were fast, the chakra he obtained from him was still far less than expected. There are two main reasons for this. One is that the opponent was too seriously injured, and his physical energy and mental energy were lost along with the blood loss. The second is that the battle over the past 2 hours consumed a lot of his chakra. In this way, naturally, he couldn't extract much chakra. Qingming had no way to control the latter, but the former. Next time, he might be able to be a little lighter to avoid losing too much life from the target. Thinking of this in his heart, Qingming retracted his palm and looked at the panel that only increased less than 3,000 points of chakra. He shook his head in disappointment. Bang! Letting the other's body fall to the ground, Qingming walked to the other two mist ninja chunins and performed the chakra absorption technique again, and began to extract the chakra of the two in the same way. Soon, the chakra of the two, as well as the physical and mental energy, were all drained by him. Qingming carefully felt it and found that the chakra in his body had increased by about 15,000 points. Although it was less than expected, it was barely acceptable. Shaking his head, Qingming no longer thought about it. Ignoring the three bodies on the ground, he raised his hand to form a seal and perform the wind style, wind wings. He flew high into the sky again and began to look for new targets. 3 minutes later, Qingming found another mist ninja team. This team had a slightly larger number of people, consisting of 4 mist ninja chunins and 2 mist ninja genins. When they were escaping, they were still being chased by a Konoha team. Qingming's eyes lit up slightly, and then he took action directly. Without any surprise, this mist ninja team was easily subdued by him. He let the Konoha team behind leave and began to extract the chakra of these people. Level 6's chakra absorption technique can absorb 2000 chakras per second and convert it into 100% of his own chakra. Therefore, it took him less than a minute to drain these 6 people. In the end, he obtained 35,000 chakras. In this way, plus the previous 18,000 points and the chakra he already had, now the chakra in his body has reached 100,000 points. And this is almost his limit. Therefore, Qingming did not look for other targets. Of course, it is not easy to find. Compared with ordinary people, ninjas have a variety of means to escape. In the few minutes after receiving the retreat signal, they have almost escaped. At this time, even if he wants to continue searching for new targets, it is not easy. What's more, he has a new task next. Not long ago, Yamanaka Aoi sent a message saying that Shinobuhisa asked him to keep up with a large army of Kurigakure to ensure that they really evacuated, rather than to kill a sneak attack. Qingming was very familiar with this mission. Last time, after the Kurigakure attacked without success, he watched the other side return to Fiayu town. This time, it was almost the same. This mission was not dangerous for him who had mastered the flying ninjutsu, so he took it on. After checking his own equipment and replenishing some ninja tools such as kunai and shuriken, Qingming raised his hand to form a seal and performed the ninjutsu, wind style, wings of wind. Swish, a pair of light blue chakra wings appeared behind him. Qingming controlled it and flapped it gently, and then the whole person flew into the sky. After identifying the direction, Qingming immediately flew to the east of the base, on the sea, where the Kurigakure stopped. A few dozen seconds later, Qingming appeared above the target area. With the help of the increasingly bright moonlight, Qingming saw that the Kurigakure fleet below had not set off yet, and many ninjas were gathering here. Obviously, after those Kurigakure ninjas left the battlefield, it did not mean that they would be able to rush over immediately. They still needed to wait for a while. In this case, if he lowered the altitude and used a few fire-style ninjutsu, he would definitely cause a lot of damage to them. Unfortunately, Qingming only thought about it in his mind and did not put it into action. It's not that this behavior is dangerous. With his current level 5 wind style, wind wings flying speed and flexibility, and the current situation of the mist ninja, even if he does this, it won't be too dangerous. The key is that he doesn't want to do it. Because this will not benefit him at all except wasting chakra. Qingming will not do such a thankless thing. So, he just floated in the air, quietly waiting for the mist ninja fleet to set off. About 10 minutes later, the mist ninjas gathered and the fleet finally set off. It is worth mentioning that it seems that because he stayed for too long, the mist ninjas below discovered his presence. At first, these people were very nervous, but when they saw that he did not make any further moves, they relaxed a lot. However, Qingming estimated that this so-called relaxation was probably a trick, and it was more likely that they were relaxed on the outside and tense on the inside. Qingming didn't believe that the enemy was flying overhead, and the mist ninjas could still relax. Maybe they are waiting for him to get close and then surprise him. Unfortunately, they were destined to wink at the blind man. Anyway, he would not go down anyway. So, it didn't matter what the other party was planning, time passed by minute. In the blink of an eye. An hour passed. At this time, the Kurigakure fleet was already some distance away from the Blackstone stronghold. Basically, Qingming could be sure that they were really ready to leave and had no intention of making a comeback. However, his mission was to determine the final destination of these Kurigakure ninjas. Even if they were 100% sure, they could not leave at will. However, from here to Fiayu town, according to the current speed of the Kurigakure fleet, it would take at least several hours. Qingming didn't want to follow the other party so boringly. Admittedly, such a long flight could allow him to gain a lot of proficiency in the wind style, wind wings, but it was still a waste of time. After thinking about it, Qingming temporarily moved away from the Kurigakure fleet and landed on the sea. Then, he raised his hands, crossed them into the Ren seal, and performed the shadow clone technique. Bang, with a cloud of chakra smoke dispersing. 9 shadow clones appeared in the field. Qingming looked at one of the shadow clones, without any nonsense, and said directly, "Next, the task of monitoring the Kurigakure fleet will be handed over to you." "Yes," the shadow clone nodded and simply responded. Then, without staying any longer, he immediately raised his hand to form a seal, performed the wind style, wind wings, flew high into the sky, and flew in the direction where the Kurigakure fleet left. Qingming withdrew his gaze from the other party, and then looked at the other 8 shadow clones, and said, "Okay, let's go too." Hearing this, the 8 shadow clones all nodded. Then, a group of people followed Qingming and ran to the location of a reef beach in their memory. Next, before the shadow clone that monitors the movements of the Kurigakure ninja returns, they will all practice there. In this way, they will not waste time. Chapter 474 Planning. In a flash, time came to late night. Qingming was practicing on the rocky beach. Suddenly, a figure came from a distance. At first glance, it was still in the sky, but in just a few breaths, it came close, then descended straight, and finally landed in front of him. Qingming opened his eyes and found that the person who came was none other than the shadow clone he sent out to monitor the movements of the Kurigakure fleet. "What's the situation?" Qingming asked. "Nothing unusual." The shadow clone shook his head and said, "For details, you can see for yourself." As he said that, he released the shadow clone technique. In an instant, a stream of chakra and a large section of memory flooded into his mind. Qingming closed his eyes and browsed carefully. Because most of them were scenes on the way, Qingming read quickly. As for the last one, it was just a scene of a group of Kurigakure ninjas returning to Fiyu town. There was not much information in it either. So Qingming finished browsing it quickly. After confirming that everything was almost the same as he expected, Qingming was completely relieved. Finally, after glancing at the increased proficiency of wind style, wind wings on the panel, Qingming withdrew his thoughts and then swept his eyes around. It can be seen that the other 8 shadow clones he brought with him are still practicing meticulously. Qingming secretly calculated and found that it would not take long for them to complete this round of practice, so he simply did not rush to disband them. Retracting his gaze, Qingming refocused his attention on himself. Then, he raised his hand to form a seal, and performed the palm immortal technique and the reflection heart technique, and began to strengthen the body and guide the evolution of the Sharingan in turn. Time passed by minute. In a blink of an eye, more than 20 minutes passed. This round of 1-hour practice finally ended. Qingming opened his eyes, glanced at the shadow clones around him who had stopped practicing one after another, and raised his hand to cancel the shadow clone technique. The next moment, these shadow clones disappeared. Instead, there was a lot of practice experience and memory. Qingming quickly closed his eyes, carefully digested these experiences and memories, and continuously converted them into proficiency on the panel. About a quarter of an hour later, Qingming opened his eyes again. After a long sigh, he pressed his swollen temples. Then, without staying, he immediately performed wind style, wind wings and flew high into the sky, flying towards the direction of the Blackstone stronghold. At this point in time, strictly speaking, he was still on a mission and could not be too obsessed with cultivation. Now that the mission has been completed, it is time to go back and report. After the handover is completed, he can arrange his own time freely. With this in mind, Qingming once again increased the speed of flight. It took the Kurigakure fleet more than an hour to get here from the Blackstone stronghold, but at his flying speed of 100 meters per second, he could return in at most a quarter of an hour. In fact, in just over 10 minutes, he arrived above the Blackstone stronghold. At this time, the war had just ended, and the Konoha ninjas in the stronghold had not completely relaxed from that state of high alert. Therefore, as soon as he appeared, he caused these people to react. However, when they recognized his identity, they relaxed again. After confirming that these people were no longer in danger, Qingming landed. After that, without any delay, he immediately walked to the command center. About a quarter of an hour later, he came out again. He had reported the movements of the mist ninja to Sano Nobuhisa, and also learned from him about the gains and losses of this battle. In general, if the ambush before the war started is counted, the battle loss ratio between them and the mist village in this battle is about 1.2. Don't think that this gap seems small and don't take it seriously. In fact, this is the result of the desperate efforts of a group of Konoha ninjas. In fact, if it weren't for the ambush of the mist ninja who came by land at the beginning, which raised the record, this ratio would be even lower. The main reason for this is that the frontal combat power of the Mist Village side is indeed higher than theirs. After all, the final battle of the Ninja World War is still about strength. If the strength is not enough, even if you can win for a while with your strategy, you can't win for the rest of your life. So, it's good to be able to fight like this. Shaking his head, Qingming stopped thinking about it and turned to his residence. A few minutes later, he returned to his room. Without wasting time, Qingming found a place at random, sat cross-legged, and immediately started practicing the palm fairy technique and reflection heart technique. Although he was a little tired after 2 consecutive battles, since he had time, he still had to complete the training plan that should be completed today. In this way, Qingming practiced for several hours. When it was late at night, he finished practicing the palm fairy technique and reflection heart technique, and then he went to sleep. The next day, in the morning, Qingming woke up from his sleep, sat at the head of the bed for a while, and then got up and walked to the bathroom. While washing, he thought about what to do next. It can be predicted that after last night's failure, the Mist Ninja of Fiyu Town should not launch any more attacks in the next 1 or 2 days. In other words, he will have at least 1 or 2 days of relatively free time. This time can naturally be used for cultivation. However, Qingming has other ideas. After wiping the water stains on his face with a towel, he walked into the bedroom and reached out to take a scroll from the bedside. This scroll is not any other scroll, but a sealed scroll, which is sealed with an eye, a white eye taken from Qing. When he planned this eye, he thought about how to use it. However, the timing was not ripe for some time. But now, it seems that preparations can be made. Physical transformation, murmuring, Qingming looked up and looked into the distance. His sight seemed to pass through the house, penetrated all the buildings in the base, and looked at a country in the southeast. This country is called the Sea Country, an archipelago country. It has no ninjas of its own, and has long relied on renting mercenaries from the water country to maintain its rule and security. Of course, Qingming is concerned about this country not because of its close connection with the land of water, but because there is a place called Anake Island in this country. If his memory of his previous life is correct, when the Third Ninja World War just started, Orochimaru set up a secret base there to study cell-fusion technology and prepare to create an amphibious ninja, so as to take the initiative in the battle with the hidden Mist Village. Unfortunately, until more than 10 years later, this experiment was not very mature. Even if the controller of the experiment, Xianzi, transformed himself into a so-called perfect experimental subject, his strength was just so-so. However, what Qingming needs is not this power, but the relevant knowledge of human body transformation. If he does not want to replace one of his eyes with a Byakugan, he can only recreate an organ and connect the Byakugan to his visual system. There is no doubt that this requires relevant knowledge of human body transformation. And Orochimaru's secret laboratory in Anake Island is the place where he can most easily access this knowledge. At the same time, it is also the most concealed way. As long as the operation is good, there is basically no risk of exposure. In addition, the newly promoted wind style, Wind Wings, can also ensure that he can come and go freely. In this way, the time for him to take action is ripe. Chapter 475, Landing on the Island. Qingming did it as soon as he thought of it. He immediately put away the sealing scroll and began to organize his equipment. After everything was ready, he walked out of his residence. He didn't leave in a hurry. He went to the cafeteria first. After filling his stomach, he performed the wind style, Wind Wings, and flew high into the sky, flying towards the open sea. Some patrolling Konoha ninjas found his traces, but didn't say much. As for the reason, it was very simple. In the past period of time, whenever he had time, he would go to the open sea or other places to practice. Although this matter is not known to everyone, it is not a secret, so no one specifically stopped him to ask. Therefore, he easily got out of everyone's sight. After flying for more than 10 minutes, Qingming came to the depths of the sea. At this time, he was already some distance away from the Blackstone stronghold. After confirming that there was no one around, Qingming did not hesitate at all, identified the direction, and immediately flew towards the direction of the Sea Kingdom. It has to be said that the Sea Country is lucky. Although it is sandwiched between the Fire Country and the Water Country, it is not located on an important waterway like the Wave Country. Therefore, it was not too affected by the war between the two sides. Therefore, when Qingming arrived here at noon, he could still see a peaceful scene. However, with the powerful insight of the Sharingan, he still found some traces of the Mist Ninja. Obviously, even though the Mist Village is now fully committed to dealing with Konoha, it has not relaxed its protection of its own country. Even for this unimportant waterway, they have sent people to guard it. Shaking his head, Qingming did not approach the other party, but quietly went to the direction of the Ghost World Island. It seems that Orochimaru was worried about being discovered. This secret base set up by Orochimaru is not near the major islands of the Sea Country. It can even be said that it is far away. Its specific location is almost out of the territory of the sea country. Not to mention the mist ninja nearby, there are not many ordinary people. However, this saves Qingming the trouble of hiding his tracks. Arriving above the Ghost Realm Island, Qingming scanned around and found nothing wrong, then he landed. After releasing the wind wings, Qingming walked through the intricate forest, spreading his perception outward, trying to find the entrance to the underground base. However, nearly an hour had passed, and he found nothing. This made Qingming quite helpless. The Ghost Realm Island was not big, but it was not small either. Without any clues or guidance, how difficult would it be to find an entrance to the underground? As for the memories of the previous life, sorry, they were not very useful at all. Sure enough, my idea of incorporating the Byakugan into the means of reconnaissance was correct. It can be imagined that if he had a Byakugan now, with its ability to see through, he could easily see through the situation underground. How could you be like this now, running around like a headless fly? Unfortunately, I haven't transplanted the Byakugan yet. Qingming stopped with a murmur. Then, he stopped looking, but mobilized the chakra in his body and burst it all out. The next moment, an extremely terrifying power spread rapidly outward with him as the center. Affected by this, the sounds of insects and birds on the island disappeared instantly. Even some mosquitoes forgot to fly because of this power and fell straight to the ground. Not only these insects, any ninja standing in front of him at this time would probably tremble in their hearts. This has nothing to do with whether the will is strong or not, but the fear of life instinct. Therefore, even ninjas who are far away will feel uncomfortable as long as they can feel this power. In this way, as long as there are ninjas in the underground base, they will definitely come up to check. At that time, he can follow the clues and enter the underground base. Perhaps this is a bit rough and will increase the risk of his exposure, but now he has only this way. Anyway, it is impossible for him to spend another hour or even more time searching for their traces. Time passed by minute. As Qingming expected, when he burst out chakra here unscrupulously, someone soon came over. However, the identity of the person who came made him a little suspicious. In the forest ahead, two Konoha ninjas wearing black robes and masks appeared in front of him. "Anbu?" Qingming asked in confusion as he looked at the two. When the two heard Qingming's question, they also asked, "Uchiha Qingming, why are you here?" Listening to their cold words and carefully feeling their aura, Qingming was sure that these two were not Anbu ninjas, but root ninjas under Danzo. There was no other reason. The aura of these people was too easy to identify, just like the several root ninjas he had met before. In this case, he had no psychological burden. If it was an Anbu ninja, he might still hesitate, but if it was a root ninja, there was no need to hesitate too much. Anyway, whether it was Danzo or his root ninjas, he would purge them in the future. In this case, it didn't matter whether he was ruthless or not. With this thought, Qingming drew out the long sword from his waist with a clang, and then he was about to perform the instant sword technique to attack the opponent. However, at this moment, several shurikens shot at him rapidly. The people who attacked were none other than the two root ninjas. They seemed to have sensed his murderous intent and took the lead in attacking. With the powerful insight of the Sharingan, Qingming could clearly see that the color of these shurikens was not right. Combined with the faint fishy smell in the air, it was obvious that they were quenched with poison. How to say it? As expected of a root ninja. Not only is his reaction speed first class, but even the ninja tools he uses are so vicious. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute strength, no matter how many conspiracies and tricks there are, they are in vain. With a thought, Qingming performed the instant sword technique. Swish! He saw a flash of green light on his body, and then the whole person avoided the attack of the shuriken at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, he also leaned towards a root ninja. Sensing Qingming approaching, the root ninja immediately threw a kunai. A subtle sizzling sound was heard. Qingming looked closely and saw a burning detonating talisman tied to the back of the kunai. Ignite the detonating talisman at such a close distance, it's really reckless. Muttering to himself, Qingming suddenly turned and distanced himself from the opponent. Boom! A violent explosion sounded. A flash of fire appeared, followed by a shock wave that quickly spread in all directions. The surrounding trees were affected and shook continuously. Taking this opportunity, Qingming once again performed the instant sword technique and quietly approached the root ninja who had just thrown the kunai. Because the opponent was too close to the detonating talisman, although he dodged in time and was not injured, He was inevitably affected by the shock wave generated by the explosion of the detonating talisman. At this time, he just stood firm and lowered his arm from in front of him. The next moment, a cold light came into his eyes, which was the knife chopped by Qingming. However, even in the face of such a dangerous situation, he did not panic at all, and immediately pulled back, trying to delay Qingming's time. At the same time, another root ninja noticed a movement here and immediately raised his hand to form seals, as if he was going to perform some ninjutsu. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.